Oh, hello there, kitten. We're back for another Coldblood and Cocktails compilation. Woohoo! First of all, thank you for being here. That means you have really good taste. Today, we're talking all about deadly affairs and obsession. Oh, two of the juiciest things in the world, other than my ass. Gucci murders, Sharon Kinney, and the Kinky Cottage murders. Do you remember those? That one was just crazy to me. Remember they were having like the orgies in the woods and then they turned their house into a brothel? I loved my costume for that one. Oh, anyways, sit back, enjoy, relax, do whatever you're doing, and let's get into it. I said, honey, the house smells like a mothball, not turn the house into a brothel. And oh, hi there. Sorry about that. Didn't see you. Welcome back to another Coldblood and Cocktails. Oh my gosh, fuzz is just sticking on my fingers from my wig glue. Anyways, hi, how you doing? How you been? How do people wear wigs all the time? There's just one little piece of hair I can... Oh, I got it. You're coming with me, bitch. But we are back with another there's hair in my drink. I'm happy to be here. I'm so happy that you're here. Let's talk about today's cocktail, shall we? We have the Forbidden Affair, which goes very well with today's story. It's kind of steamy, smoky, with a burn that lingers, much like our Murderous's little extracurriculars. But we have 1.5 ounces of mezcal for the smokiness. We have 1/2 ounce of Saint Germain, because it's floral and kind of romantic. And then 1/2 ounce of fresh grapefruit juice, which was kind of tart like her marriage. And then a dash of bitters for the bitter ending that we have today. And then you can garnish it with a grapefruit or something dehydrated, which is me. Oh, I don't like mezcal. But no sense wasting spilled milk or whatever the saying is. Also, I really want to take the audios of this and turn it into a podcast somehow, so let me know if you'd be down to clown with that. I kind of thought it was a good idea. Wait, also, you can't see it, but I do have bosom today. I am with Cleve. Are they socks? Absolutely, but anything to get the job did. Okay, let's go. Wait, one stroke of the feather. There we go. Cheers to you, darling. Okay, so our story today... hold on. Our story today begins in a picturesque countryside in Scotland where rolling green hills and quiet villages masked a scandal bubbling just beneath the surface. It was the 1960s and Sheila Garvey was a poised and well-dressed socialite, and she seemed to have it all: a grand home, cleavage, wealth, and a respectable marriage to a Mr. Maxwell Garvey, who was a pig farmer with a bank account quite as robust as Sheila's curves. But Miss Thing, money cannot buy happiness, and Sheila's story is proof that sometimes diamonds are just as dangerous as daggers. Maxie was handsome and rich, and she was beautiful and bright, which means it's probably a match made in the depths of Beelzebub's colon. They were both in their early 20s, and these groovy times were changing, man. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Sheila's husband Max wanted them all. At this point, he had people working on his farm for him, so he was just raking in the dough while doing minimal effort, which, I mean, that part is fucking goals. Snaps for you. We love a good business bitch. So first came the fast cars, then the private airplane, next came the booze and the handful of pills typically combined at the wheel of his plane. He'd swoop over the sea, flipping his plane for a thrill, anything to feel alive. Girl, just do some poppers on the dance floor in Dallas, much better. But the adrenaline rush combined with the drugs filled a void he'd craved for ages. Soon that grew boring though, and Max needed more. He really pondered and reflected on his life, like, what was missing? He had danger, drugs, booze, and parties, but where was the sex, man? Sure, his old lady could strip the chrome off a tailpipe, but he wanted to be wild and naked. One day he arrived home with the back of his truck packed with fully grown trees, and Sheila's putting her gardening gloves on like, fuck yes, we're finally getting some landscaping. But landscaping the man was not. He planted a triangle of trees and thick bushes near their house, which nobody really thought anything of. After all, farmers did this all the time. It's for a little bit of privacy, you know. But what the community didn't know was that this triangle was filled with naked people. He was trying to create a nudist colony. And not just any nudist colony either, an orgy colony. An organy? A colorgy? I don't know, but damn, Max. Eventually, people would realize this gentleman wasn't your run-of-the-mill farmer tending to livestock and coming home for tea. No, he had hobbies, and by hobbies I mean swinging parties, wild affairs, and an insatiable thirst for the risque. Oh my, the sound is making my ample bosom weak. This farmer, honey, he liked to milk more than cows, and if he was dealing with a hog, I can guarantee you it wasn't the kind that oinked. Max was a true non-believer of monogamy. He was practically a one-man revolution for debauchery, transforming their home into a pleasure seeker's paradise, basically a brothel, which I'm not terribly mad at because our costume is cute. His wife, though, probably wasn't quite as happy. In fact, while he reveled in the company of strangers, Sheila was silently like, fuck this shit, but she still played the part of dutiful wife, smiling through gritted teeth as her husband paraded his lovers in front of her. He'd say, come on, babe, join us, and Sheila was like, No. But Max, where can I put this? Oh no, my whole hat is falling off. Yeah, shit, we'll just put it right there. How's that? Max, though, he was pretty damn convincing because Sheila did eventually join in on the orgies and was just as enthusiastic as her husband, allegedly. Oh my god, I just love this eye look. And with their house now labeled the Kinky Cottage, they had some living up to do. Okay, side note, but have you ever watched the Netflix show How to Build a Sex Room? Oh my god, I love that show. I want that job. Anyways, basically, this house had just become a giant, crusty, musty, dusty sex room. A soon-to-be messy sex room. Now, Max, he could swing both ways. He batted for both teams, and when a young, handsome 20-year-old Brian came into the picture, Max's pants got short and tight. Max had had many affairs with men before, and he was absolutely attracted to Brian, but he had different plans for this boy. He would purposefully leave Brian and Sheila alone in the room for long periods of time, but be looking in from another room next door just hoping they would hook up. Like, that shit would really make his meatloaf. But Sheila, unless she was with Max, was only with Max. She didn't believe in cheating like her husband did and was pissed off that Max would even suggest a thing. She wasn't into that at first. After a few years, Brian, who regularly hung out with the couple, was staying the night. He heard a little nickety knock on his door and was greeted by a butt-ass naked Sheila, who had been persuaded into putting out by her hubby. What a gentleman. And they say chivalry is dead. But something interchanged, and now Max and Brian were tossing a coin to see which one would sleep with her. Well, obviously it turned into a three-way, I mean, duh. But that eventually grew, and you know, I'm not here to judge, but I'm still going to. Things got weird. Like, I totally get it. Be your kinky self. But what was about to come, giggity, well, that was just sloppy. Max had begun sleeping with Brian's sister, who was also married. Brian's sister actually joined Brian, Sheila, and Max for a four-way. And then they added the sister's husband and another lady. Like, goddamn, at what point are you like, Is this my foot? Whose nutsack is on my elbow? Max had sexual ADD though, and he very quickly grew bored of both Brian and his sister, and now Max was demanding that both he and Sheila find new playthings. Sheila though, her tampon string was burning at both ends and was getting pretty tired of Max's ways. How long was this gonna last? Like, was this there forever, finding new people to swing with and then Max just never being satisfied? Her patience, as thin as the condoms Max wasn't wearing, was dissolving rather quickly. Max wasn't just controlling, he was very calculated in how he started to break her down like a discount Dr. Frankenstein, but with more charm. It started with isolation, which was kind of subtle at first. He noticed that Sheila would go out for hours at a time with her friends and come back kind of hating him, probably because she was telling them all the shit he'd do to her. And then in return, this manipulative little ass munch convinced her that it was her friends that were toxic. Then he took control of the finances. Every single dollar that she spent had to go through him like he was some Nazi business investor from hell. Need feminine products? Gotta ask King Max, and you might not even get them. Craving a decaf oat milk coffee with light whip and sugar-free syrup? Well, only if his royal cheap ass approves. Basic necessities became privileges he started doling out like he was Bob Barker on some sadistic game show, all while he's out flying his private plane, sucking on some stranger's left titty, getting his crank yanked. The emotional abuse was just relentless. One minute he was love bombing her like a hormonal teenage boy, and the next he was making her feel like the biggest bitch of a burden on earth, all while he was pumping and dumping his gasoline into someone else's tank. And she tried to pull away, but the guilt trips were instant. He'd dramatically argue like, who else is gonna put up with you? And then there were the threats, never direct because cowards like Max prefer the art of suggestion. But he'd hint that if she left, she'd be broke, alone, and in his words, nothing. Charming. And then on top of the mental abuse, there were the orgies. Sheila now wasn't even sure if Max truly liked the orgies or if this was some fucked up way to prove his dominance to her. He'd be going to Pound Town on some bimbo down the block, but would make Sheila look him directly in the eyes and not break eye contact. According to him, it was her duty to take part, parading her around like a sex toy with fresh batteries. And if she hesitated, he'd punish her not with fists, but with fucked up mind games and words. He'd gaslight her into believing that this was normal, this is how a marriage should be, and she should be grateful for these experiences. And then afterwards, he'd act like nothing happened, like he just took her out for a steak dinner instead of selling their souls and holes to some strange Poles. And the breaking point, it wasn't really dramatic, it was kind of slow, like a pot of water heating up until the frog inside doesn't even realize it's boiling alive. Sheila woke up one day and she didn't recognize herself. She had no autonomy, no self-worth, and if Max had his way, no future beyond being his broken little pet. And sexy Brian, remember him? That's when he became not just an option, but a lifeline. Brian saw her as a person when Max had reduced her to an accessory. He didn't just offer her an escape, he reminded her that she was worth escaping. She'd spent years playing the dutiful wife, but the humiliation of being a bystander in her own marriage was becoming unbearable. And Sheila, oh, she was ready to throw her panties into a brand new fire, one that did not include Max. Hold on, titty adjustment. And Brian, even after all this time, he was still handsome and sweet-talking with a twinkle in his eye and a libido that could put a hole through aluminum siding. He walked around like his danglers were bumping into his knees, and Sheila liked that kind of swag. He had that rugged charm of a man who knew how to get what he wanted and the confidence of somebody who never had to face consequences. Oh. And most importantly, this magnetic man was everything that Max wasn't: attentive, passionate, and not shoving Sheila into swinging parties she didn't want to be at. To Sheila, Brian wasn't just a lover with a curved banana and an ass like an Olympian. He was an escape hatch and a lifeline from the suffocating walls of her very unhappy marriage. And that rule she had of not doing anything sexual without Max was now extinguished. In their affair, baby, that shit burned hotter than Pompeii. The kind of passionate, all-consuming romance that makes people lose any common sense. Midnight rendezvous turned into stolen weekends at secluded inns where whispered declarations of love intertwined with reckless abandon. Hickeys were given on body parts, chocolate eaten off of curves. If they could wear each other's skin, they gladly would. Shit, that sounds nice. The skin-wearing part, not all that lovey-dovey shit. Ew. They fed off each other's desperation, Brian craving excitement, Sheila yearning for freedom. They created a world of their own, one where Maxwell Garvey was nothing more than an obstacle in the way of their happiness. When Sheila was with Brian, Max wasn't her husband, and she really liked that feeling. And this new sensation was kind of bubbling up ideas that would soon turn dangerous. What started off as pillow talk, an offhand comment here, a lingering what if there, began to take shape into something far more sinister. Let's take a sip for that shiz, shall we? Now, late-night conversations no longer revolved around stolen kisses and sweet nothings. They became more tactical, planning sessions wrapped in silk sheets and moonlight. The fantasy of Maxwell's simply disappearing was no longer just a fleeting thought. It became a structured and deliberate plan, one that would alter the course of their lives forever. With Brian by her side, Sheila allegedly began plotting her husband's demise. And they could have been subtle with it too, a little poison in the tea, an accident during one of Max's orgies, but no, they had to pick the worst fucking way to do things. Just cause you're pretty don't mean you're smart. Late on the night of May 15th, 1968, Maxwell Garvey lay fast asleep in his marital bed, completely unaware that his time was up. A gunshot broke the silence, with a bullet striking him in the head before he even had the chance to wake up. In an instant, Maxwell, the man who had indulged in every pleasure life had to offer, was reduced to nothing more than a lifeless body. A body that was now in a pool of blood that they didn't really think about. And bitch, the mess didn't end there. Panic set in like, shit, what do we do with the body? This wasn't a Hollywood thriller where the villain suavely walks away untouched. No, Sheila and Max, they had a big problem, one that involved a 6-foot corpse and a need for discretion that they absolutely did not possess. Not only that, but Sheila ended up getting the nervous shit, so she had to write a whole new plan on a piece of toilet paper. Poor thing, it was a shitty plan too. So what did they do? They wrapped Maxwell's body in a blanket. Literally a pig in a blanket. They shoved him into the trunk of his own car like a reusable Aldi's bag and hoped for the best. I couldn't tell you what the fuck they were thinking, but Sheila and Brian, along with a friend of theirs named George, took the grisly cargo to a secluded area. This was on the water, and the salty air was just whipping the hell out of their faces as they dragged the body to the beach. And they looked around and were like, well, now what? So Sheila dropped to her knees and started digging like a dog burying its bone. And that is where they left Max, in a shallow grave on a public beach, because clearly no one would ever think to look there. And I think it was next to a big-ass drain pipe, too, so there's runoff from that like, come the fuck on, man. You had so much time to plan. And now that the deed was did, you'd think their common sense would tell you to maybe lay low after pulling off some shit like that, right? Get the sand out of your cheeks before you go making some noise. And would it have been too much for Sheila to just pretend to be grieving in a way that wasn't straight out of a bad soap opera? But no, Sheila put on a performance worthy of a small-town award, weaving a tear-soaked tale of a devoted wife whose husband had simply vanished into thin air. She made public appearances, she accepted condolences with the perfect balance of heartbreak and grace, like Meryl Streep who, bitch? An Academy Award goes to. But again, this was Scotland in the 1960s, not a Hitchcock thriller, and people talk. It didn't take long for the rumors to swirl through the countryside faster than syphilis in a nursing home. The whispers started in pubs, they spread through the markets, through murmurs during mustache rides, and before long reached the ears of those who mattered the most, the police. Max was a wealthy and well-known figure, and the idea that he just up and left without a word didn't really sit right with anyone. His business partners were side-eyeing Sheila, and his friends were exchanging knowing glances over their pints, and the local police were already jotting notes down that seemed to mention Sheila quite a lot. Then came the real kicker, Sheila's own behavior. That sobbing, blubbering bullshit of her moping around lasted like 30 minutes. Now, instead of being the distraught wife desperately searching for answers, she seemed Relieved? She wasn't just moving on, she was surviving and thriving. And it was in such a way that had all the eyebrows raised around town. Gone were the days of her standing in Maxwell's shadow. Instead, Sheila seemed to revel in her newfound freedom, trading in her role as humiliated wife for that confident, independent woman who was suddenly, I dare say suspiciously, doing quite well for herself. New hair, new bras, new dress. Oh, this was the glow up of the century. She attended social gatherings with a little extra sparkle in her eyes. She dressed a little bit more vibrantly and appeared to be enjoying life in a way that she never had before. Where the fuck is your veil and black frock, girl? Like, you're doing it wrong. Neighbors noticed that she was starting to host more get-togethers than ever, perhaps to flaunt her new status or to distract from the ever-growing suspicions around her husband's disappearance. Suspicion for that. As suspicions grew, police decided to do some literal and figurative digging. No joke, it took like literally 10 minutes to solve this case, too. Maxwell Garvey had seemingly vanished off the face of the earth, leaving behind his wallet, his car, his passport. I mean, who runs away from home without any of the essentials? His rubber sheets? Still in the closet, not even a toothbrush? Come on. The police weren't buying it either. I guess the sheets on the bed were still blood-stained. And there was a weird timeline, too, and the fact that Sheila's stories kept shifting like her morals, police knew something was up. So they turned their attention to the other shady characters orbiting Sheila's very complicated sex and murder solar system. For example, George, the friend that Sheila and Brian had brought to help bury the body. Now, I'm not here to say whether anyone is bright or not, but he wasn't bright. Definitely not the mastermind of anything. Or maybe he was, because it was such a terrible plan. George, my spider came off. How the fuck did that happen? I didn't really love that anyways. George was brought in for questioning and cracked like an overpriced egg. The moment the cops leaned in just a little bit, he spilled the entire gruesome tea. Not just a few drops, he poured the whole fucking kettle. He confessed that Maxwell Garvey, he was murdered, and he was buried at the beach. Police headed right to the dunes, and sure enough, after a few digs, they found what remained of Maxwell Garvey. His body wrapped in blankets with a pillow over his face, as though that would somehow muffle the crime itself. To the police, it was very clear that this was planned, albeit very shittily. It was deliberate and utterly cold-blooded. And now that the body was found, the whole house of sticky lube-covered cards came crumbling down. Sheila, Brian, and George were all arrested, and suddenly the little whispers around Garvey's sex life took a backseat to something much darker. Murder. Murder, manipulation, and a shallow grave full of secrets. There's nothing people love more than a good juicy secret. But the gig was up, and now Sheila's perfectly curated world of deception flattened like a cake under a fat hippo. He had been buried, quite literally, under a tidal wave of bad decisions. And the trial was the event of 1968, the kind of spectacle that had the British tabloids just foaming at the mouth. This wasn't just a court case, it was a real-life telenovela with all the scandal, betrayal, and high society drama that anyone could ask for. The press swarmed the courthouse daily, just eager to catch a glimpse of the woman behind it all, Sheila Garvey. And oh, honey, she did not disappoint. Every day, Sheila arrived in court draped in an elegant, somber fashion, playing the part of fragile, delicate widow to absolute perfection. But despite her delicate size and carefully dabbed tears, prosecutors weren't having it. They tore through her performance like a bad West End play, laying out the scandalous, salacious details, the affairs, the cold-blooded murder plot, and of course the doomed love story between Sheila and her young lover boy, Brian. Witnesses started taking the stand, painting this picture not of a tragic widow, but of a calculating conspirator who wanted her husband gone by any means necessary. The jury took it all in, the extravagant lifestyle, the secret trysts, and the utterly incompetent attempt at getting away with murder. And Max's yellow and decayed skull was even brought into the courtroom as evidence, which made one of the jurors faint. Juror. Ooh, that's a hard one. In the end, they weren't buying her act either. I don't think anybody was, except for Sheila. And after deliberation, they were handed a very guilty verdict, sentencing both Sheila and Brian to life in prison. Sheila wrote to Brian to tell him, "Sorry, babe, but we are donezo forever." But get this shit, after only 10 years in prison, they were both released. What? Oh, and George, the friend, he got a 6-year sentence for being an accomplice. Yeah, so now Sheila's case remains one of Scotland's most scandaloso crimes. A story of lust, desperation, and one very bad plan. And if you're into true crime like this, it's definitely one to do a little digging on because, oh wait, I didn't plan that pun, but do some digging on this case because we only skimmed the top. It's just a reminder that affairs, greed, and murder rarely mix well. But darlings, they do make for a hell of a cocktail. Not my favorite one, but it's a cocktail. Oh my goodness. And I said, honey, I may be undercover, but we can still get under the covers. And oh, hi there. Sorry about that. Didn't see ya. I'm Nadie, and welcome back to the Coldblood and Cocktails podcast. How you doing today? I hope everyone's good. I'm a little bit warm. I'm in my whole winter coat. But anything for the costume. The show must go on. But yeah, I hope you're dandy. I'm actually snowed in today. It's something like 4 degrees out. I would sell my left nut for a palm tree right now. But I know what'll warm me up. Let's talk about today's cocktail, shall we? Today we have a vodka gimlet. It's very easy. It's just 2 ounces of vodka, 3/4 ounces of fresh lime juice, 3/4 ounces of simple syrup, and shake it with some ice. Oh, that's strong. How do I always end up with chunks of stuff in? Oh, wait, you know what? The chunk is moving when I move my cup. It's the light reflection. Buh. So today's case is so confusing. To this day, we still don't know what the hell happened. Like, is Alice guilty? Was it her husband? Was it someone else entirely? Like, please let me know what you think. I'm dying to hear. Also, don't forget to subscribe over on Spotify. I post these a day early over there. All right, let's dive into it. So the night air in Queens was thicker than a frozen Go-Gurt. And on July 14th in 1965, that sticky, moist New York darkness, it wrapped itself around the Kew Gardens Hills complex like a piece of raw bacon around a filet mignon. Most people were sound asleep. Women were dreaming of any man but their husbands. Men were praying their blood pressure pills wouldn't keep them from waking up with morning wood. And everyone was doing the human thing, pretending their lives weren't exactly what they were. But one window stayed lit a little longer than the rest, a window belonging to Alice Crimmins, the flame-haired mamacita that tabloids would later dub everything from the sex queen to the red-headed Jezebel. You know how the 60s were. They were the height of misogyny, and fuck all if you were a woman who was divorced and hot. But tonight, she wasn't yet a centerfold villain. She was just a woman waking up to something very wrong. Alice tiptoed through her apartment, her bare, immaculately manicured feet on the cold linoleum. She was known to move with that perfect blend of elegance and irritation like a pissed-off ballerina. Her ex-husband, Ed Crimmins, still had a set of keys to her place even though they were separated. Not for late-night booty calls or anything like that. She vowed not to fuck with that little bitch anymore, but more so in case something happened to her so he could get in and help the childrens. And her 2 kids, Eddie Jr. and Missy, were supposed to be sleeping peacefully in their room across the hall. Except they weren't. The room was empty. The beds were untouched. And the window screen was popped the fuck out like a stripper's heel at last call. The curtains fluttered like slices of roast beef caught in the wind as if someone had slipped through the window. Alice is standing there like, wait, hold the fuck up. No one really knows exactly what went through her mind in that first moment. Alice did have kind of a knack for hiding her emotions behind a perfect poker face, complete with the sharpest eyeliner in all of New York City, but she did know one thing for sure. Her kids were not where they were supposed to be, and like, what the hell is up with that? So, as one could expect, she starts to freak the fuck out and goes through the apartment again, opening cupboards and drawers as if they could fold up like a potholder, yelling out their names. Nothing. No footsteps, no giggles, no sleepy little faces stumbling out of the bathroom from a midnight pee. Just the kind of silence that makes your stomach fall through your ass. And then, as every parent has probably felt at least once in their life, that kind of dread crawls up your spine like an epidural. Comes up behind you, hooks its fingers in your hair and whispers, "I'm gonna raw dog you so good tonight." Wait, no, sorry, wrong voice. This one whispers, "Something's wrong, bitch." But Miss Alice, for the most part, she didn't panic. She was like, okay, girl, keep your shit together. Like, stay calm, just stay calm. And so she calls Ed. And honestly, this guy was the kind of ex-husband you only call in a straight-up emergency, which this totally was. He worked for a security firm. He had big opinions, a big-ass temper, and what some might call a real talent for blaming Alice for literally anything. Weather's bad? Alice's fault. He got the shits from bad beer with the boys? Alice's fault. But she rode his pogo stick and popped out 2 kids with him, so she was stuck with him in some capacity. Ed hauls ass over to her place and barrels into the apartment like Elmer Fudd looking for that pesky wabbit. He checks the closets, the corners, the windows, all the same places Alice just checked, just with a lot more noise, the entire time mansplaining about how they're probably just hiding in a wardrobe eating stolen cookies. Then he sees the screen popped out, pushed from the inside, and his whole body clenches tighter than Alice's waistline. He's like, where are they? And Alice is like, how the fuck would I know? That's why I called you, dumbass. He is panicked, rightfully so, but she's a little bit too calm for his liking. In that moment, that single microscopic moment of laissez-da, laissez-faire in her voice, that was when this case went from what happened to the kids to what kind of woman is Alice? Because Alice didn't sob, she didn't collapse, she didn't clutch Ed like some helpless 1960s housewife who needed her big, strong manses with muscles and cigarettes rolled up in his t-shirt sleeve to hold her up. She was calm as tits, so Ed was the one who called the police. Nosy-ass neighbors started peeking excitedly out their windows like an ice cream truck full of sex toys was barreling down the road. But soon word spread about what happened and the excitement turned into panic. Radios crackled, flashlights swept the grass, and the cops started asking questions that sounded less like concern and more like, let's see how fast we can decide that you're the criminal. Alice looked the cops in the face, lit a cigarette, and that was it. One little exhale of smoke did more damage to her reputation than anything she ever did afterward. Because in the late 60s, a mom who smoked, wore eyeliner, and didn't cry on command wasn't a modern woman. She was a bitch of a witch who used her broomstick to sweep her crimes under the rug. A freaking whore and a half, according to the public's opinion. Officers swarm in like Black Friday shoppers at Walmart. Alice is like, I saw the kids last night. Missy was tucked in with her little teddy bear. Eddie Jr. was a cranky little shit, but he eventually settled down. I swear to Allah, Buddha, and Jesus Christ, the window was closed. There was nothing strange, nothing alarming. But the cops look at Alice like she just admitted to poisoning Snow White. They check out her red hair, her curves, her well-proportioned nightgown, her cool, calm tone, all of which were obviously character flaws. They start asking about her dating life, her boyfriends, her marriage, her habits with gentlemen suitors, her morality, her vibrator collection, if she had anything more than granny panties. Not about the kids, not about possible intruders, not about who else had keys. But she remained cool as a cactus, just sucking away on her cigarillo. And you gotta admit, if my kids were missing, not that I would ever have any kids, ew, but hypothetically, I'd probably be a little bit more grief-stricken, like, wouldn't you? I mean, shock hits in every way possible, but that's weird. It doesn't mean she killed him, though. Hours pass, search parties form, police canvass the area, spreading out like watery gravy. And then that same day, a neighborhood boy finds little Missy's body inside St. Nicholas Park, less than a mile from Alice's apartment. The poor thing had been strangled and left in the brush like a discarded Snickers wrapper. The world just stops, neighbors gasp, police radios explode, but the shock wasn't over because the next morning, Eddie Jr.'s body was found too in a different area, but not far from where his sister's body was discovered. He had also been strangled and posed in a way that didn't really make sense. So now they had two dead kids, two quick discoveries, two crime scenes so close they could have bled into each other. And then you had his mother, this woman whose face the police couldn't stop studying. She was a freaking phenomenon to them, not because of evidence, but because she didn't cry. Alice just stood there, her cigarette trembling so hard it looked like a blur, and the police around her were waiting for her to crack and scream and fall to the ground. But she didn't. She never did. She just stared dead set ahead with a tight jaw like every bone in her body had turned into a stale crouton. Oh no, I forgot to turn on my candles back there. Oh, hold on. I knew there was something. Oh, there we go. All is well now. Can you even tell they're lit? I can tell in my heart. Well, long before Alice Crimmins was standing in her kitchen under the world's most unflattering fluorescent lights with cops staring at her like she was hosting a titty show, she was Alice Tierney, a girl raised in a New York household where Catholic guilt was served for every meal. Alice grew up in a world where little girls were supposed to be pretty and polite and so quiet you could hear the hum of the lava lamp over their breathing. And she was very pretty, nobody could deny that. A redhead with sharp features, a banging personality, and the kind of body they designed mannequins after. And she knew she was hot shit, ain't nothing wrong with that. But she learned at a very young age this was inconvenient. Her beauty wasn't treated like a gift, it was treated like a threat. She was warned against it, chastised for it, told to hide it, cover it up, dull it down. Be humble, be modest, wear a habit or a burqa, shit. Or at least wrap yourself in a burlap bag for fuck's sake. But here's the thing about telling a girl or anyone that they can't be seen. It makes them crave visibility like a coke addict itching for a fresh can of it. But she did really try to cut herself a nice tasty slice of life. She married Ed at 19, a very practical, safe choice. It was the wonder bread of marriages, flavorless with no color. And most importantly, the Catholic choice. The this is what girls do choice. Ed was in the Air Force when they met, very clean cut, serious, tall, you could eat a maraschino cherry off his 8-pack, but a man who wanted order, obedience, and a wife who mirrored his values. I heard they both used the same razor to shave their legs because nothing says manly like an entirely shaved body, right? At first, Alice slipped into that role of mechanical Stepford wife. She cooked, she cleaned, she birthed 2 beautiful babies. She tried to mold herself into the domestic angel Ed believed all wives should be. Well, she fit into that mold as well as one of those mayonnaise and spam gelatin dinners from that era. Alice was far from a domestic angel. She was a little hottie bo body, a social creature. She liked laughter, music, going out dancing, bumming cigs off of strangers, getting attention. With looks like hers, how could she not love the eyeballs on her? She enjoyed feeling alive, not like a decorative statue of Mary meant to sit on the mantle and gather dust. But that's exactly what Ed wanted. He wanted a blow-up doll he could inflate when he needed it and then put it away when he didn't. So their marriage was immediately fucked up and quickly turned controlling. He started policing where she went, who she talked to, how she dressed. If she wore lipstick, then she was a vain little harlot. If she didn't, she was neglecting him. If she clipped her hair up, she looked cheap. If she let it fall, she was inviting sin. And holy hell in a handbasket, if she showed a bit of kneecap, you better run for the hills because shit was gonna blow. You literally could not win with this man unless you were a beige curtain that tasted like a rice cake. And this started eating away at her. She wasn't a rice cake. She was a 12-layered trifle filled with decadent cream. Giggity. She tried to shrink herself. She tried to be what he wanted because that's what a good woman was supposed to do. She got rid of a few layers of her cake, replaced the cream with vanilla sugar-free pudding, and ultimately became a piece of dried-up toast. Because a man compromising for a woman? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Or wild idea, maybe no one should conform at all. I don't know, that's crazy, right? This isn't Nadie's marriage counseling hour. That's a different podcast. The point is, he was a big old bitch. Alice wanted to be a good wife. She truly did, but regardless of her marriage, apparently she was a fabulous mother to those children. Still, something inside her stayed restless, like a bird that kept forgetting it couldn't fly. Or like me forgetting not to eat before a colonoscopy and I'm hitting up a 1 a.m. all-you-can-eat buffet. Then Ed got the security job, which was good pay, but his hours kind of screwed him up. His temper got shorter and his jealousy got stronger. He kept tabs on her constantly. If Apple AirTags existed then, he probably would have attached one to her tampon. He bitched about groceries, neighbors, phone calls, the carpeting, the plants, anything, and Alice was drowning. She was suffocating. In her ass, it was about to crack. To her, it felt like he'd put a plastic bag over her head and she'd finally ripped a little hole in it to breathe. Slowly but surely, she started reclaiming tiny slivers of her life. She was chatting with other moms, going to Tupperware swaps, lingerie parties, flirting with bartenders, going on the occasional date after they separated, and they were separated, so like she was allowed to date. She was lonely, like for fuck's sake, she was only 26. Oh God, who wouldn't kill to be 26 again? Such tight skin. She'd lived so much life, yet her life was only just starting. But the NYPD didn't see a lonely mother navigating a broken marriage. They saw red hair, cleavage, a cocktail waitress with a pretty smile, and wasn't afraid to show a little thigh. And I guess in their minds that was enough for them to leap from woman with a dating life to woman who murders her own children. Alice was human. She wanted things: freedom, affection, youth, beauty, a sense of self. She wanted to breathe. So by the afternoon of day 2, the NYPD wasn't investigating a double-child homicide. They were investigating Alice Crimmins' personality, her clothes, her lipstick, her cleavage, her eyebrows, her dating history, her walk, her voice, her posture, her neighbors, her boyfriends, her panties. They did everything but perform a pap smear on this woman. And when detectives arrived at the crime scenes and realized they didn't have fingerprints, footprints, fibers, witnesses, hair, blood, or DNA, which didn't exist then, they pivoted. They had nothing to go on. So they said, Alice likes men, case closed. One detective even wrote in his notes that Alice was guilty because she behaved too cool, too composed, too self-contained for a woman whose children were murdered. Which is not fucking evidence, it's just a steaming pile of judgment. Weird behavior? Hell yes, I think we can all agree on that. But not a guilty verdict. But these men, bless their chain-smoking 1960s misogynistic, ill-equipped hearts, followed their instincts straight off a cliff and into years of surveillance, harassment, and an obsession with Alice's sex life. They watched her constantly. Every single one of them probably got their rocks off at some point while looking at her through a telephoto lens. Cops and unmarked cars sat outside her apartment 24/7 eating donuts like they were protecting a president and keeping Duncan in business. Except instead of protecting, they were tallying how many times Alice opened her blinds. If Alice walked to the store, they followed her. If she changed outfits, they wrote it down. If she met a man for a drink, they photographed it. If she looked too sad, they said she was faking it. it. If she looked too calm, she was a cold-hearted bitch. If she breathed wrong, she was a manipulative hoe. This wasn't an investigation, it was a 5-year slut-shaming scrapbook. And while detectives were peeking through her curtains, the real killer, whoever they were, assuming it indeed was not Alice, they lived life completely uninterrupted. People in the apartment complex whispered not about the murdered children, but about Alice. One neighbor swore Alice cried the wrong way, another said she walked too sexily for a grieving mother. Someone claimed they saw her hugging a guy near the dumpsters, and boom, guilty. One lady's like, her skirts are too short, so you better send her to the electric chair. Someone said she smiled 3 days before the murder, so she should probably get a lethal injection. Every woman who didn't fit the 1960s motherhood standards got judged, and Alice was under a NASA-grade microscope. She was being treated like she personally set feminism back a decade and revoked women's rights to vote. And Ed was more than happy to help police build their fantasy. He told them Alice had affairs. He told them she wore revealing clothes and crotchless underwear. Said she was wild, sexual, great in bed, gave amazing head, and worst of all, cared about her figure. He was front and center in tarnishing her reputation and making her look like a terrible mother. The dude might as well have walked into the precinct with a PowerPoint titled, "My hot ex-wife is definitely a murderer," which is seriously giving baby dick vibes, am I right? Let's take a shot for that. And the detectives, they ate that shit up like free chocolate silk pie. One of the lead detectives, Jerry, developed a little bit of an obsession with Alice. Allegedly, this wasn't romantic, but honestly, I'm not convinced that he didn't have a little crush that he mistook for intuition. He followed her, stared at her like she was one of those magic eye books. He'd spent half a stakeout studying how long she talked to a man at her door. Then he and his crony detectives started pelting her with wild-ass questions like, did you kill your kids so you could have sex freely? Were you tired of motherhood ruining your figure? Did you resent them because men looked at you? Which, these were actual questions. The police didn't just investigate her, they shoved her into this lurid fantasy of a sinful harlot who punished her children just because they existed. And the public, they were gobbling that up like holiday fruitcake. Because nothing distracts people from their own miserable lives quite like throwing stones at a woman, guilty or not. The newspapers turned Alice into a cartoon femme fatale. They wrote about her skirts, her dates, her body, her makeup, her hair, her boyfriends, her social life. They analyzed her harder than they analyzed the actual crimes. There are literally articles from the era that mention her eyeliner more than her children. This was the biggest steaming pile of fabricated juicy gossip bullshit wrapped in a trench coat and pretending to be journalism. Then came the so-called breakthrough, except it wasn't one. Police claim they found fibers, traces, impressions, things that might possibly align with something from her apartment or her car. It was as solid as that mayonnaise and spam jello dinner. None of it would convict anyone today. None of it should have convicted anyone then. So naturally, because this was led by men who could do anything they wanted, they tried to use it to charge Alice. But they still didn't have one important thing, a confession. So they started coming up with a plan, a morally questionable, legally flimsy as hell, wildly fucked up plan to break her down. They followed her even more, harassed her, pushed her, pressured her, wore her out for years. And one detective famously said, "We're gonna get her if it takes the rest of our lives." Not, we'll solve the case, not, we'll find the killer, not, we'll gather evidence. No, their goal was to get her. Alice wasn't a suspect, she was the freaking target. Meanwhile, year 3 of the NYPD's obsession rolled around and Alice couldn't freaking sneeze without a detective scribbling in his notebook about how she sneezed like a slut. Her life stopped functioning like a real life and became a stage with the most judgmental Simon Cowells to exist. But then a new character entered the stage, Tony Grace. Tony was a young, hung, handsome, cologne-drenched, queen-born swagger in his step kind of sexy. He called everyone sweetheart, he radiated charm, danger with the scent of an aqua velva bath. He was obsessed with Alice the same way men get obsessed with women who are glamorous, dangerous, with a sprinkle of tragedy. And Alice liked him too, which mattered, but not in like a soulmate, take my heart, it's yours kind of way. More of a, you're hot, my life is hell, come distract me with some solid meat kind of way. But the relationship lit a bonfire under the detectives' asses because in their 1960s brains, a mother couldn't grieve and date. Hell to the no. A mom couldn't laugh and hurt at the same time and she certainly couldn't have a libido and be innocent. So they decided Tony was a weak spot, Alice's pressure point. And they started targeting him too. Cops were tailing Tony. They listened to Tony from the next booth over at the cafe, peed in the next urinal from him, watched Tony through his blinds. They documented his life like he was the Zodiac killer instead of just some guy trying to take his girlfriend to dinner without a SWAT team third wheeling. They even bugged his phone, bugged his car, bugged her apartment. They recorded them having sexy time through hidden microphones, and their ears perked up like a dog's when these two grown adults were having a private conversation. And it wasn't even about murder, not about crime, but about fear and the stress and the harassment, the trauma of it all. The New York Police Department treated that shit like it was fucking Watergate. Like they just found out Jesus was on Epstein Island. And most of what they captured was useless rubbish that should have gone straight to the curb. Alice was crying and venting, saying she was scared of being framed, scared that the harassment would never freaking end. And in a few recordings, she did what traumatized, cornered people do. She speculated. She said, it must have been someone who knew us. Then came the moment they'd been waiting years for, their alleged breakthrough. Tony asked her softly, what do you think happened that night, Alice? And she sighed, exhausted, hopeless, traumatized, and said, I can't talk about that. Now, if you or I said that, it would simply mean I can't emotionally go there right now without falling the hell apart, like damn. But to detectives, it was a full-blown confession. I don't know how they got that, but champagne was popped, egos were inflated. One detective nearly had an orgasm from excitement, convinced he decoded the Rosetta Stone from that one fragile, tired line. And remember, they still had zero murder weapons, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no forensic evidence, timelines, motives, or anything that made sense or any connections between Alice and the dumping sites. All they had was a woman they didn't like and years of voyeuristic notes about her cleavage. We'll take a suspicious chug for that. Oh, yeah. So the prosecution, they cooked up a theory as sturdy as wet toilet paper. Alice murdered her kids because she wanted a more exciting sex life. That's what they ended up going with. Not rage or psychosis or financial stress or a custody battle or postpartum mental illness. Nothing. To seal this theory, prosecutors needed a witness, anyone who could say anything to glue their case together. And they found one, a neighbor whose reliability was held together with chewed up gum and an old rubber band. They claimed that on the morning that the kids vanished, she saw the daughter Missy talking to Alice around 12:30 p.m. That's it. That's all. That is everything that they said. Never mind that this statement was given years after this allegedly happened. Never mind that the witness changed her story 6 times. Never mind that experts said the timeline was physically impossible. They didn't care. They had their theory, they had their villain, they had their one very iffy witness. And Alice did the one thing prosecutors wanted most. She finally snapped. Not shaved her head and flashed her cooter kind of snap, crackle, and pop. Just a little teeny tiny snap, enough to curse at detectives one day and slam a door. Police immediately wrote in their logs that she displays anger. She's highly suspicious. Like, what the fuck? She's being stalked by an army of men who think her foundation shade is evidence. So there she is in 1968, years after her children were killed, walking into a courtroom that was packed, buzzing, salivating for drama. Men in cheap suits craning their necks, reporters elbowing each other for a better view, women clutching their fake pearls like they're squeezing blackheads. Alice walks in, cool, polished, devastatingly composed. Red hair perfect, dress immaculate, makeup flawless. She looked like she had just stepped off the set of Mad Men. And the prosecution, their asses were like, see how good she looks? Proof that she's absolutely guilty. But had she come in looking like a slob? Also guilty. She literally could not win. The prosecutor didn't give a single drop of evidence. They painted her as a hoe bag who had her ankles in the air for any John, Don, or Juan who wanted to rearrange her guts. Saying she turned her apartment into a brothel. Her clothes were too tight. She was too attractive, which honestly I would love to be accused of, but maybe not at my own murder trial. And the man prosecuting her had the audacity to say with a straight face the real sign of guilt was she exercised. She dieted, she kept her figure, the horror. They even suggested her posture was suspicious. And then we get to Anne, the neighbor witness whose memory seemed to work like an Etch-a-Sketch that tumbled down a flight of stairs. She became the prosecution's angel from heaven. One day she saw Missy in a dress, the next day in shorts. One day she saw her at noon, the next day was 3 p.m. One day Alice said hello, the next Alice ignored her. A normal jury would have laughed this lady out of the building, but instead they listened to her like she was Moses returning from the mountaintop with brand new tablets. Alice's poor lawyer kept reiterating over and over that there was no evidence, no eyewitnesses placing her with the bodies, no proof she even left the apartment, no motive, no consistent timeline, no physical link to the dump sites, nothing. And in all fairness, they couldn't prove that she stayed home and they couldn't really prove that she left. So that was kind of up in the air. But the prosecution put something into the jury's head that really stuck, that Alice was a bad mother for having a life after her kids died, and that was enough. So Alice Crimmins was convicted of manslaughter. Some people cried, some people cheered. Alice fainted and the cameras flashed. But the real shock wasn't the verdict, it was how little evidence had ever existed. America was split down the middle. Half said she did it, look at her, she's freaking hot. The other half said, are you out of your damn mind? This is misogyny with a badge. And the truth, nobody knows what happened. The evidence is murky, it's complicated, it's speculative and full of shadows. Not even the fun kind where you make shadow puppets with your peenie. The police built an entire case around a woman they didn't understand and didn't like, and they won. So here we are decades later still asking, what the hell is the truth? Because even today there's still no compelling evidence that she killed her children. A modern jury would laugh this case out of the courtroom, or at least I'd like to think so. Alice ended up serving around 12 years between her convictions and the release, and then she Houdini'd her ass out of public view, just poof, gone like belly button lint in the wind. Once she got parole, she was in her late 30s, still young but quieter, hardened, probably tired of being someone's prison wife, but she still maintained her innocence. She moved upstate and lived extremely privately, no book deals or talk shows or tabloid interviews. And who could blame her after years of being stalked? Like the last thing you'd want is a camera in your face. Her ass outlived every detective who hunted her, outlived the prosecutors, the jurors, every gossip columnist who torched her reputation. But today, her case is studied in criminal justice courses, gender studies programs, wrongful conviction seminars, and media ethics classes. Not because the murders were solved, but because Alice Crimmins represents one of the most sexist prosecutions in American history. And that's just one of them, which is honestly fucking depressing. I'm actually contemplating doing the Lindy Chamberlain case, if y'all heard about that, but that was also very sexist and kind of similar with everything. But yeah, that is our story. We need another little suspicious shot because everything about this was hella suspicious. Sad and suspicious. Please drop me a comment. Do you think she did it? I don't know. I don't think she did. I don't know that it was the husband, but like somebody had to have come in, and the fact that the window was popped from the inside, I don't know, but this whole thing smells very fishy. Can't tell if there's a fruit fly or fuzz in here. Protein. Hello everyone, it's Nadie and welcome back to Makeup and Mayhem. As you beautiful people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of positive energy, okay? Thank you. Oh, my little everlasting gobstoppers, how you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world you are having a marvelous day so far. I myself am doing very, very good. You may have noticed we have a little bit of a different setup today. This video is actually going to be sans makeup. I know the whole point of this is makeup and mayhem, but my allergies have been crazy, and because I've been rubbing them, I've formed a sty in this eye, so that's pleasant. Anyways, for this episode, I've already put on the makeup. It's just a little bit of highlighter and can squee, and I'm calling it good. And I've actually been wanting to do this kind of style for a little while. This is our 5th episode, and of course, this is very similar to Bailey Sarian's Makeup, Murder and Mayhem? Makeup, Murder, what is it? Fucking watched every episode and I can't even remember what it's called. But this is very inspired by the queen, Bailey Sarian. Definitely check her out. She is wonderful. The only difference is she puts on makeup and I normally do, and today we're not. And I do love doing my makeup on here, but it actually takes about 5 or 6 hours to film one of those videos just because I'm so slow at it. And hopefully doing it this way might take a little bit less time. Let me know down in the comments below if you like this style, and maybe once in a while we can skip the makeup and just do stories like this. And then maybe I can set up my background a little differently. Also, do we recognize this? This is what I normally film against. It's a green screen. How fun. Who the fuck is here to talk about a backdrop? Absolutely no one. Let's get into today's story. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be interesting. I'm squeezed between 2 little desks, which oddly enough is not the first time that's happened. But if anybody would like to join me today, I am drinking a chocolatini. I was gonna do a normal martini because this story does take place kind of in the 1950s, and there is just nothing more elegant than being in the 1950s, smoking a cancer stick and drinking some vodka. Well, I don't have any olives, so we're having this. So today's story, we are talking about a housewife turned killer, and she is still out there. This did take place quite a while ago, so this could be anybody's grandmother. You don't know. Anyways, Sharon Kinney, have you heard of her? She was an awful person. Like, I'm not here to female shame at all. I love women, but oh my goodness. This isn't about being male or female. She was just a terrible human being. And I love how every video I'm like, this is a channel of positive energy, and then I'm like, murder. Well, that's today's story too, so brace your girdles, honey. But Sharon is literally one of the most self-absorbed, selfish people out there. With that being said, you know this is gonna be a good-ass story. Also, hopefully I'm in focus. Shit. Maybe I should check on that. Okay, we're good to go. So Sharon Kinney, she'd be born as Sharon Hall. She was born in 1939, the same year as my grandmother, but Sharon was born in Independence, Missouri. When Sharon was young, her whole family just up and moved to Washington State, but by the time she was 15, they had already moved back to Missouri. And when she turned 16 during the summer, she met a strapping young college student who was 22 named James Kinney. They had met at a church function and just instantly took a liking to each other. It was like peaches and cream, pecans and pie. I don't really know how much that would fly today because that is kind of a big age gap, but back then, that kind of an age where you're like 16 and 22, that wasn't that big of a deal. But I guess the age really didn't matter to them because they'd go on dates, they'd canoodle under the willow tree. It was a summer fling that was probably just as romantic as the summer was short. So by the time fall arrives and James has to go to school, he's like, bye Felicia. Poor Sharon, she was just distraught. She's like, well, what am I gonna do all by myself here? Well, one thing that literally anyone who knew Sharon would tell you about her is she is interested in two things and two things alone. One is men, which only comes second to her own self. Even at 16, she just dreamed of somebody taking her out of the town that she lived in, and James was that. He was her little Prince Charming in this fairy tale world that she seemed to create in her own head. So shortly after James did leave for college, she penned him a letter and said, oh, guess who's pregnant and guess whose it is? Yeah, okay, Sharon. James believed her and he says, all right, my love, I will come back from school, I'll put it on hold, and I'll come back and marry you. What a respectable gentleman, right? Going all the way back to Missouri to marry your baby mama? Well, after the wedding, people start to kind of notice that she's not getting any bigger, she's not having any pregnancy symptoms. People are kind of like, and just in passing, she nonchalantly says, oh, I miscarried. Now, I don't know if Sharon actually did miscarry, but that is a huge thing to lie about. Like a big thing. But I think it might be kind of safe to assume that she may not have actually been pregnant, only because she would use that line several times falsely throughout her killing career. Kind of seemed like anytime a guy would lose interest in her, she would just whip out that pregnancy lasso and reel him back in. But again, I don't know. So if she did, I'm sorry, Sharon, that is awful. But again, she is a pathological liar, so... In fact, on their marriage license, she lied and said that she was 18 and a widow. She was 16 and nobody knew of this husband that she mysteriously had. But she had told people that when she was in Washington growing up, she was married to somebody and that guy died in a car crash. Which, again, I don't know if I fully believe because people are like, well, who was the husband and when were you married? Okay, Sharon. But whatever past life Sharon had, she didn't care. She was just looking for a future. So she and her new husband moved to Utah, become Mormons, and James continues his schooling. But very shortly after, they realized maybe this isn't the life for us, and they hauled their asses all the way back to Missouri again. These people move around a lot, and that is hard. I will have a drink in their honor for that. It's me coming up with excuses to drink. Well, now that they were back, Sharon really didn't have a whole lot to do. She was kind of bored, so she'd just do odd jobs. She'd babysit, she'd hem some clothes, she would do like a little storefront work, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, literally the least amount that she could contribute, but just enough to say that she had a job and was kind of taking in some money, which I guess was fine because James did work very hard as an electrical engineer and he made enough for them just to get by. Like they weren't uncomfortable, but they kind of were at the same time, but they certainly weren't like hoity-toity. And I don't think Sharon really enjoyed working. She kind of wanted to be a housewife and be a mother. And so in 1957 came an actual baby who they named Dana. I think it's Dana. Dana? I'm gonna say Dana. Yeah. Cheers to you, Dana. I know you're just a baby now, but tighten the pins on that cloth diaper, girl, because you are in for a wild ride. Well, remember how I said they weren't living like a Rockefeller? Even though she was working these odd jobs and they did have kind of like a dual income, money was still tight, but Sharon would spend as though there were no budget. Like they had no limit. Mama expected luxury and she spent like it. Budget? Who is she? I've never heard of her. Doesn't she do my nails? So James would slave away and work his ass off during these night shifts, and while he was sleeping during the day, Sharon would just go spend all of the money that he just earned plus more. But Sharon wanted more. Just having a loving husband that gives you every fucking thing that you could imagine that wasn't enough. I'm gonna sit here, eat my cashew, and judge you, Sharon. By the time she and James had their second child, Troy, she was already slipping her biscuit to some other guy that she knew in high school. So by 1960, James started to do a little bit of snooping, a little bit of digging around, and he could smell the bullshit just wafting off Sharon. I don't know about you, but I can't blame him. He was just way over her excessive spending, and he was growing very suspicious of her extramarital activities, which cue our first suspicious shot. Cheers, baby. So don't be suspicious. Don't be so... that one's for you, James. Also, if you see me like sucking my teeth, I have a little snack platter here so that I don't get, you know, too faint. No, but actually I will faint if I don't eat, so it's a thing. Anyways, James is like, I kind of want to divorce this lady. She does not give me good vibes anymore. And Sharon's like, yeah, I'll divorce you if you give me $1,000 and the house. So even though there was some other chicken on her biscuit, she was the one who was wanting everything. Okay, Sharon. Fucking Sharon. But James' parents were devout Mormons, and they said, please, James, do not divorce this woman. And they really urged them to stay together for religious purposes, so the divorce just didn't happen. Sharon Kinney, she was a woman for the boys. She liked to play fast and loose, emphasis on the loose, and you know what? That's her journey. Ain't nothing wrong with being a little loosey-goosey. You get it, Sharon. But for fuck's sake, Sharon, could you keep it in your pants while you're married? But we aren't gonna judge her for that, because trust me, there are much juicier things that we are gonna judge her for, so we'll push that to the side, I guess. But Sharon was cutthroat. She was just ruthless, and that combination had men lining up for miles. We all love a good bad girl, don't we? All she needs is a latex catsuit and a sword, and she could take on the whole freaking world. She was just very well versed in the art of deception, and from a super early age, took on lovers left and right like that was her shtick. Bad to the bone she was, and to this day, still a wanted criminal. How, might you be wondering? Well, twist my arm, I'll tell ya. Just kidding, you ain't gotta twist anything. This story has enough twists and turns. So now that we know the little backstory, let's start the real juice. It all started in March of 1960. We're still in Independence, Missouri, but police receive a very frantic, hectic phone call from Miss Sharon Kinney, who is 20 years old, asking for help. An officer drives up and sees Sharon with her toddler just standing in the doorway. He approaches her and she says, my husband is in the back bedroom and is completely unresponsive. The officer calls for backup and says, okay, ma'am, no problem. Let me just squeeze past you. I'll make my way to the bedroom. And there he sees, why the fuck he was unresponsive? He's got a bullet hole in the back of his head. Of course he's unresponsive. Right next to him, softly laying on a pillow, was a .22 caliber pistol, just sitting there. It was very clear that there was no struggle that happened, and so they loaded him up, and unfortunately, on his way to the hospital, he did pass away. He was only 25. When I look at pictures of James and Sharon, it might just be because it was so long ago, but everyone looks so old. I never would guess that they were 20 and 25. Like, to me, in my mind, they're like 30s and 40s. Does anybody else feel the same way? Even when I look at my grandparents' younger pictures, I'm like, how old are you, Grandma? You've got to be like 30 or 40. And she's like, oh, I was 12. Okay, maybe that's exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. People just looked older back then. I don't know why. Anyways, so James does pass away, and Sharon, who at this time is just a sweet, young, innocent little angel of a woman, she gave her story and police bought it. I mean, they didn't really have a reason not to. She said this was a normal, average night, not out of the ordinary. Her hubby came home. He was sitting on the bed cleaning his gun just like he always did. Boys and their guns, am I right? And her husband decided to just take a quick lie down, as a lot of men do after they empty their barrel. But as he's laying down, that's when their 2-year-old daughter decided to wander in. She saw the gun that James had just been cleaning lying there on the bed, and she thought, this could be a fun toy. Next thing Sharon knows, she hears a loud pop and she comes running into the bedroom, and there she sees her husband with a bullet in the back of his head. Now, this was the 1960s, and I'm not gonna say it was necessarily more innocent of a time, but damn, it seems like you could get away with murder a fuck of a lot easier then than you can now. Am I right? I'm not wrong. And Sharon, she should have taken up acting because she was a true pro. Cops really did believe everything that she said. She was just that good. To police, she seemed sufficiently distraught. You know, her story was believable, everything lined up. Her sadness really did seem genuine, but not all the cops really 100% believed her, so they weren't quite ready to write this off as an accident caused by the toddler. For one, there were no other witnesses to this crime other than the 2 people in the house. One of them is a toddler, the other one is Sharon, so how are the police gonna know who held the gun and popped a cap in this dude's noggin? For Sharon, it is literally the easiest way out because it's kind of the dad's fault for negligently leaving a loaded gun where a child can access it, but he's dead, so who's to say who did it? Like, how convenient. Does that qualify as a suspicious shot? Sure. But also, should Sharon have shared in the responsibility of keeping her daughter out of that room in the first place? Probably. But I think she was probably also counting on her husband not falling asleep and letting a toddler play with their gun. So after questioning Sharon, police determined that she is obviously a very credible woman, so they just write it off as an accident caused by the toddler. If Sharon says it's true, then fuck, it's true. I'm sorry, but we need to unpack this for a second. This man was laying down and was shot in the back of the head while napping, and the cops believed this? I mean, maybe he was laying on his side and after he got shot, he flipped over, but in all of the articles and with all the research that I have done, they say he was on his back. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, how bullets don't just like curve. Make it make sense. I'm telling you, shit was easier to get away with back then. Police sent the gun in for fingerprints, but nothing came back. But get this, they didn't even do a gun residue test on Sharon or the little toddler. So like, fuck me with a rusty rake, right? What the hell? Why even bother doing anything? Well, I guess that's not completely fair because Sharon did tell police that oftentimes their daughter would just play with the gun randomly. Like, this was a toy of hers. She was allowed to do so. And so when police ask her to pull the trigger, the little girl can pull it perfectly fine. Like, she's a good shot. So in all fairness, after seeing this toddler shoot basically the center of a target, they're like, okay, maybe yeah, she probably did it. The police end up taking the gun and never giving it back to her, but this case was pretty much dropped and labeled as an accident. In extremely suspiciously short order, Sharon collected the insurance money to the tune of $30K, which this is back then. Now that would be well over $250,000, so she was sitting pretty. And just as fast as that insurance was collected, she moved her ass on. She got a new hairdo, a nice new sports car, which she paid all cash for, and ended up hooking up with a married man that sold her the damn thing. But a car and a quick shag wasn't all that she wanted from this man. No, that is never enough. She wanted this man to leave his wife, Patricia, the kids, the house, leave everything to take care of her, because what Sharon wants, Sharon gets, damn it. He and Sharon would kind of sneak and scuttle off in the same kind of car that he and his wife had shared many a romantic night in, and he'd replace his wife's memories with this hot, young, fresh woman who was so much spicier than the taco he was eating at home. But for him, Sharon was honestly just a fling. He had this whole damn life. He had children, he had a wife. He had no intention of ever leaving Patricia. Sharon didn't like that because, remember, what Sharon wants, Sharon fucking gets. Well, not to be vulgar, but Sharon's tacos seemed to love this man's special sauce because she said, fine, don't leave your wife, but I'm preggo with your ego. All this dirty talk is making me hungry. Well, her telling him that she's pregnant really didn't faze him, which kind of makes you wonder how many other little squirts he's got running around. It fazed him so little, in fact, that he was like, okay, well, bye, Sharon. I'm ending the affair now. Good luck. Well, this was a complete shocker to Sharon, to say the least, because last time she used that line, she ended up getting married. And that is exactly what she was hoping would happen with this car salesman, another man who can take care of me. Except she actually was pregnant. But for Sharon, those wheels in her mind are always going. She knew exactly how to separate her new man from this wife. All she had to do was lick her thumb, look in the phone book for a little number, pull up her rotary dial phone, and wait for one ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingies, and when Patricia answers, she says, honey, I have some terrible news. Your husband has been having an affair with my sister. Why don't we meet and talk and I can tell you all about it. Click. And mic drop. So they meet up and Sharon says, hi, nice to meet you. Maybe we could go for a little ride alone, just as two ladies, and talk about this. And I guess in the 60s, everybody trusts everyone, because why the fuck not? And she says, yeah, let's go talk about it. Well, unfortunately, good old Patty never returned home that night. And Patricia's husband receives a tip describing who she was last seen with, and he recognizes this description as fitting Sharon perfectly. And so he calls Sharon and he says, were you hanging with my wife? And without batting a lash, she says, why, yes, I was. I was telling her all about our affair, but when I dropped her off, she was fine. She was talking to some guy in a green Ford. I don't know what Sharon was expecting, but obviously this didn't make him too pleased, so he hung up in a very big fit of rage and confusion and anger and just everything. Like, the gall of her, in his mind, she's just his little side hoe. She had no room to enter, like, his personal family life. He already told her that this was a done thing. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. Okay, Sharon and the car salesman are both equally to blame, so I'm not really going to defend anybody here. But he was just so frazzled and confused that he showed up to Sharon's place begging for more details about where she could possibly be. And things were getting heated. Like, as he was leaving, he held a key up to her throat. He was pissed at her, and he wanted details about his wife. He was getting worried. So to lessen the suspicion, Sharon says, okay, you know what? Why don't I help you in this search? We can kind of look around. So she enlists another lover of hers to help in the hunt, and they're just searching together driving around town, just looking everywhere, but unsurprisingly, no sign of her. Although I don't know if her eyes were exactly on the road, if you know what I mean. Well, since there was no sign of Patricia, Sharon didn't want to waste a good dick appointment, so she says, "Hey, little lover boy, you want to go to this popular makeout spot? We can do a little hanky-panky, little knock of the boots to bump uglies. Cheers to y'all." They park the car, and just as things are heating up, Sharon sees off in the distance the glimmer of a yellow dress on the car headlights. She stops, she pauses, and then just starts bursting out crying because she remembers that the last thing she saw Patricia in was a yellow dress. So she makes this young gentleman lover stow his tent, get out of the car, and investigate. Poor guy can barely get down there with his 2 legs, and now he's got to deal with a 3rd one? No, ma'am. He slowly creeps through the woods and approaches this woman who is lying face down, obviously very dead because she has multiple bullet holes all over her body. She had some in her head, she had some in her shoulders and her back. This was definitely not an accident. So he runs back to the car, absolutely scared shitless, and tells Sharon, who makes the very wise suggestion that maybe they should go to the cops about this, or more so that he goes to the police alone after he drops Sharon off at her house, and he is not to tell the police that she was even with them. He was out there alone reading dirty mags. She says, "For the love of fuck, do not tell them that I was with you, please." So what does he do? He drops her off at home. All is good. He goes to the police, and then he says, "I was just making out with Sharon Kinney, and she saw this dead body, and she made me drive out to tell you, but she told me not to say that she was with me, and now I don't know what to do." And Sharon's just like, "Fuck this guy. I didn't even get laid and you ratted me out." Because the moment the cops hear Sharon's name, they're like, "Ooh, red flag, like ding ding." Because not but a few months previous, Sharon had been involved in a shooting with her husband, and now she's involved in another shooting? Suspicion. Literally, ooh, dark. If I don't fill this with dark humor, I will cry, and nobody wants to see that. And to add to the suspicion, when Sharon found Patricia's body, this was literally 3 hours after Patricia's husband had held a key to her throat. So needless to say, it really didn't take that much detective work for police to figure out that there was bad blood between Patty and Sharon. They talked to Sharon's now baby daddy and Patricia's husband, and he said that lady did it. And oddly enough, she wouldn't take a polygraph test, but she did admit that yes, she was having an affair with this woman's husband. The police put 2 and 2 together and very speedily arrest Sharon because she's accused of murdering this woman. But police start adding things up and making a few connections between this death and the death of her late husband James, and so they end up arresting her for both James' murder and Patricia's murder. They weren't positive that Sharon had murdered the both of them, but they did know that James was killed with the same kind of weapon that Patricia was. They did have the gun that killed James in custody, and they did comb all of the surrounding bodies of water. They looked in all the fields and the woods, and they didn't find any gun. Nonetheless, she's arrested for both their murders, and then she ends up getting 2 separate trials, one for each case. Well, young, spritey, and gorgeous Miss Sharon became a sensationalized killer. Everyone around Missouri was talking about her, they knew about her, and she would very quickly become a household name. This whole case honestly reminds me a lot of Chicago, like Roxy Hart, because this was a case of a lifetime. You have a normal-seeming, innocent housewife with blonde hair and gray eyes, a woman who most men dreamed about, who did something that most women dream about doing, offing their husbands. So to some housewives around the world, it's almost like they looked up to her as a trailblazer while men around the world were fantasizing about her. Well, the trial ends up getting kind of delayed because at this point she is very, very pregnant. She's ready to pop that bun out of the oven, and she does. The trials finally do start, and prosecutors feel like they kind of have the most juice on the Patricia case, so they start with that one. Even though they couldn't find the .22 caliber pistol that killed Patricia, they felt the case was pretty strong, like, we got this. Well, though their case may have been strong, what was stronger was the attraction of the all-male jury to Sharon. She had every single one of those men wrapped around her fingers, and she could twist them any way she wanted. And it wasn't just the jury, she had everyone in that courtroom's attention, like she was the star of this show. And control she was in, so much so that on the second day of trial, she arrived fashionably late, which was perfectly okay. Just waltzed right in, sat herself down, and was like, "Okay, I'm ready." After several days of trial, the jury needed only 1 hour to deliberate, and they said, you know, there are just too many loopholes to find this poor innocent woman guilty, so what do? They found her not guilty. The entire courtroom just burst out into cheers. Even jury members were coming up to her to get her autograph, like she was a true celebrity. People outside were wanting to meet her. Everyone knew who she was, and they were rooting for her. I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Well, no, I wasn't. Sharon, being Sharon, loved all of this. She sucked in all of this attention. She felt like Marilyn Monroe, like she was on top of the world. So by the time her second trial came for her late husband, she was like, I've got this in the bag, like easy peasy lemon squeezy, or trigger squeezy. I don't know, it is suspicious. Oh, it's all gone. Well, the trial starts, and normally Sharon is one to love a curve, but not this time. She is thrown quite the curveball when she sees her ex-boy toy waltz up, straddle that stand, and proclaim that one time she offered to pay me $1,000 to kill her husband. Instantly, a big pile of shit hits the fan and things start to crumble, and she is convicted of murder. Didn't expect that one, did you, Sharon? But all she can do is to shackle up and start serving her life sentence in Missouri. I will say though, she definitely had the public on her side. Like, people did not like this verdict. She was America's sweetheart after all. Even the family of James didn't think that she murdered James. Like, they would never speak ill of her in interviews. They wanted her out just like the rest of the world. So many people wanted her out, in fact, that a petition was sent around and was actually very successful. But I mean, a petition isn't going to make you eligible for any kind of release. But what does make you eligible for release is when the court realizes that almost this entire case was based purely off speculation and there was no real physical evidence. So this idea is brought up to the Supreme Court and they're like, well, shit. No, not convinced. Denied. This lady had some serious luck, though, like much more than I have ever had. Because shortly after the Supreme Court denied this case, they actually did reverse it due to a legal technicality. So she's released on a $25,000 bond, and she's awaiting a retrial, which 25,000 USD back then would be almost 200,000 today. So, like, somebody really liked her to pay that and get her ass out of prison. So what does she do with her time while waiting for a new trial? Oh, but what she does best, she finds a new man. This guy is a hairdresser and a blacksmith. I paused for a second because I was watching a little documentary on this, and who they cast as her lover was definitely family. And so when I think of that, I laugh. It's not like hairdressers have to be gay or anything. I just thought it was funny because they did a really bad job casting. It was literally like me portraying her husband, so there is that. Anyways, romance of the century. They met in the unemployment line in the summer of 1964, and I do have to say, after that, her hair never looked better. They fall in love rather quickly, as seems to be Sharon's style. I'm surprised she didn't tell him she was pregnant, but I guess she didn't need to with this guy. They end up going to Mexico on a little premarital honeymoon, which actually works perfect for Sharon because even though she's under a bond, she has no geographical restrictions. She can go to fucking Mars if she wants. So Sharon and Frankie head to Mexico with margaritas, white sand, and sunshine on their minds. Only the Sharon of the US of A wasn't the same Sharon that Mexico got. Down in Mexico, she was Jeanette. And she'd also used Frankie's last name, which really wasn't that weird because they kind of had every intention of getting married when they were down in Mexico. Don't know why she went by Jeanette though. Maybe it was a sexual fantasy thing, I don't know. So they arrive in Mexico and Sharon is instantly taken aback with her jaw just drooling on the floor. There are all of these fine-ass American tourists here and I want to lick. She just could not keep her eyes off every single one of them. Well, I guess her eyes weren't the only thing that she couldn't keep off of them. You know, she was a handsy gal, and after a few drinks, she found herself in a sketchy-ass motel room with a gentleman suitor who wasn't Frankie. She'd agreed to go to this guy's room because he apparently had photographs to show her. Don't think I would go to some stranger's room to look at photos. That sounds like I'm gonna be tied up and murdered. Anyways, this guy wasn't Frankie. She had eyed him at the bar, and I think now that she was in his room, she was kind of having second thoughts. She was kind of taking in the smell of mothballs, looking at the inch of dust that was caking on the dresser, and I think by the time she saw the stains on the sheet, she was like, you know, maybe I shouldn't be in here. Or at least that's what she told people. Frances, though, she says, honey, I'm just in this room for a liquid nightcap and to see whatever pictures you have laying around. According to Sharon, this just wasn't anything sexual because she was in love with Frankie. Well, Sharon would later say that this man had other ideas and tried to take advantage of her. And after telling this man no several times to avoid being assaulted, she pulls out a gun in self-defense. And she would tell people she totally meant to shoot into the ground. She had no intention of killing this man. She just wanted to give him a little bit of a fright, you know, put some pee in his panties. Unfortunately, her aim didn't really seem to be quite as good as her toddler daughters had been because she missed the ground completely and fired several shots into his chest. Sharon's just like, well, my baddie-o on that one, y'all. Obviously, this has caused quite a ruckus. One of the hotel employees who was out in the hallway could hear the gunshot. He comes running in to make sure everyone's okay, and he walks into a dead body on the floor, this frantic, crazed woman holding a gun, and the lady turns around, points the gun to the employee, and shoots him in the shoulder. The employee's like, I do not get paid enough for this, fuck it, all up and down. They run out of the room, they lock Sharon in, and they call the cops. Well, the Mexican authorities didn't give a shit about her charm, nor did they believe her story for a minute. Sharon's jig was up because it was found by ballistics that this man was shot with this same gun that killed Patricia, and that's why the gun was never found, because she had it all this time. So she was almost immediately convicted of murder and sentenced to 10 years, but then 3 years were added because 10 just seemed too lenient, which I mean 13 does too, but okay, go off. Sharon would spend the next 4 years in a Mexican prison, and pretty much like how she took command of all the juries she was involved in, she took command of the inmates. She was a boss-ass beast there, and she even earned the name La Pistolera, which translates to the gunfighter. Boom, bitch, you're finally caught. But even though she was big tits in the slammer, she still wanted out. Like, she had more to prove. She wanted more men. She wanted more money. She wanted a life. She wasn't gonna wait another 9 years for that, because what Sharon wants, Sharon fucking gets. In my opinion, getting 13 years for 3 murders is a pretty damn good deal. Like, sit down, sweet cheeks, sip your toilet wine, and just wait it out. Well, that wasn't gonna happen because, once again, what Sharon wants, Sharon fucking gets. In December of 1969, Sharon didn't show up to the prison roll call. This was normal because she was head honcho. It was pretty lenient, so she was kind of allowed to do almost what she wanted around town. But when she didn't show up for the night call, guards thought, I guess this is kind of getting a little suspicious, which, cue suspicious shot. Oh, I want some more. It wasn't until 2 a.m. the next morning that anybody even mentioned the disappearance. Once they realized that they done fucked up and she's gone, they start a manhunt, and once again the world stops for Sharon. Everyone's looking. Police weren't sure if she was heading to a former inmate's house just to hide out for a little while, or she could have gotten on a bus. Like, she could be miles away now. This was, as my British friend would say, a proper shit show. It was found that after only 4 years of serving her sentence in this prison, she squeezed her little ass through some opened window that nobody was even guarding and just ran. She just vanished into the night like a drunken burp in the wind. Some people thought that maybe she bribed a few of the male guards to look the other way during a very convenient blackout the night before, but investigation found that security in this prison was very, very lax, and nobody had to be bribed not to guard this window because there was never anyone guarding this window. Others thought Frankie, her boyfriend, husband, fiance, whatever the fuck he is, may have aided in her escape. Some people thought maybe she dressed up as a man and walked right out. Some more gruesome theorists believe that maybe the family of her last victim broke into the prison and took her out so that they could kind of do what they want with her, aka, you know. The FBI would kind of team up with the Mexican authorities to conduct a very, very brief search, but they knew it was pretty unlikely that she'd return to the USA. She did have some family in Alaska, but she was really nowhere to be found. So after 11 days of searching, everyone just threw in their hats, put their hands up, and said, fuck this. She probably crossed into Guatemala, and we will never see her again, so a search is kind of pointless. There were no clues to her whereabouts. There are no clues to her whereabouts. Like, she is still on the run, missing. I know she'd be over 80 now, so who knows? She might not even be alive. But lil' mama, she ran. This was almost 60 years ago, and Sharon's arrest warrant was put out in 1964. It's still active to this day, making it one of the longest standing arrest warrants in the Kansas City area, and one of the longest outstanding felony warrants in the entire USA. So, like, she made history. I don't know if it's the way that she wanted to make history, but she chose the path. I guess when Sharon was arrested for her last murder, they didn't take her gun, or they couldn't find it, but when they searched Sharon's belongings in Mexico, they did retrieve the gun that killed Patricia, confirming that she killed her. But because of double jeopardy laws, basically because she was already tried and found innocent for that case, she can never be retried even if she's found. This whole story just makes me feel a certain way because Sharon, she could have been something, man. Like, more than this story. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. She had outstanding wits. Like, she could have been a pioneer in female politics, a professor. With the ability that she had to wrap people around her fingers, she could have been anything that she wanted and done some good in this world. But instead, she chose to be a serial killer. And it's not like any killing is justified, but she only did this for selfish convenience. Because after all, what Sharon wants, Sharon fucking gets. She wanted to sleep around, so she kills her husband. She wants the man that sold her a sports car, but he doesn't want her, so she kills the wife. And she still doesn't even end up with him. She wants a fun night in Mexico without her future husband, so she kills the guy she didn't cheat on him with, and then blames the dead guy. And that prison prison sentence she doesn't want? Well, no freaking problem. We'll just escape. This is just a bad person doing bad things to mostly innocent people. What do y'all think about this? Do you think things were easier to get away with, like, way back when? I feel as though with her, there was a lot of leniency. Maybe that was common. Maybe she was just lucky. I don't know. But she got what she wanted. She's a free woman, and who knows where the hell she is? Who knows where she was? Who knows what she became? Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Sorry about that. How are you? My name is Nadie, and welcome back to another Coldblood and Cocktails. As you beautiful people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away, because this is a channel of positive energy, okay? Thank you. Oh, my perky little parrots, how you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world, you're having a marvelous day so far. I, myself, couldn't be any better. I've got my bling, I've got my parrot, what more could a gal want? Oh my gosh, so much wig hair, But before we hop into today's story, today's drink is just orange juice with a little splash of strawberry schnapps, peach schnapps, and blue Curaçao. It's so good too. You actually might not know this about me, but I am a huge fashion lover. I've been a fashion photographer for like years. You'd never know this because I'm rarely ever out of sweatpants, but honey, before Miss Rona, I was at New York Fashion Week sitting at shows, and do I have some celebrity stories to tell you, but we'll save that for a different day. Okay, this wig is gonna be the death of me, and no pun intended. But point of the fucking story is, I love fashion, yet I've never really heard anything about this, and quite truthfully, I'm not even certain how I feel about the brand itself after doing this. But this is definitely one of the most under-publicized stories in my opinion. Like, we all know about the death of Giovanni Versace, the tragic suicide of my personal favorite designer, Alexander McQueen, and then while doing research for this case, I found so many more interesting deaths or mysteries around some of the top designers in the world. Like, it's crazy. So please let me know if you'd like me to cover any of those stories, or honestly, any stories around celebrities, because some of the things that I found are just very intriguing. It's crazy what money and fame can cover up, and I guess cheers to that. It's not a very good cheers. But today's episode was certainly inspired by the very popular movie House of Gucci, not to be confused with my roommate's old bedroom / brothel House of Gucci. But I've actually not even seen the movie. I honestly don't know that I ever will. I don't have the attention span to sit and watch a movie, especially a nearly 3-hour long one. Like, holy tits. But the biggest reason I didn't watch it was just because the Gucci family was a little bit miffed at some, I guess, I don't know, inaccurate portrayals. I mean, after all, it is Hollywood. They have to juice shit up and switch things around so that it makes a good movie. So there's just so many details to this story. I want to misconstrue as little as possible, so I'm just telling my story based off my own research. If you saw the movie, that's fabulous. Let me know how this version compares, but if you're not down for watching the movie, we have a much shorter and much more condensed version, at least hopefully shorter. You know what? I think my bangs are just gonna have to like fall, and that's how they're gonna be. But like I said, this is a very, very watered down version, more leaning on the history of Gucci rather than the murder, because it's kind of crazy to know the things that led up to the murder. But I'm gonna tell you right now, you better take some Dramamine, because the twists and turns in this jizzfest might have you a little bit motion sick. If me moving this parrot doesn't give you motion sickness before that. But really, I would have to be here a whole freaking week just to tell you the full story. Like, there are so many interesting tidbits that are still coming out of this story today. So yeah, the movie might be a little bit more detailed and lubed up, but the story today is gonna fuck you just as hard. So I think this is actually our first international story. It starts in March of 1995 in Milan, Italy, just as I'm about to head to bed at 8:30 in the morning. Maurizio Gucci was walking around town, strutting in his loafers, making his way to the office, just trying to figure out how to make a little bit of extra cash, because at this point he had been booted from being the chairman at his family's famous fashion empire, Gucci. And just as he's walking into the building, he feels someone come up behind him, and before he knew it, everything went black. He had been shot 3 times. And then just to make sure he was good and gone, the assassin fired one last shot into his head. The assassin starts to flee, and at that point, some guy comes around the corner and starts shooting at the assassin. It was fucking chaos, man. The assassin ends up getting a bullet in the arm, runs to the street to an escape car, and just leaves. Like, what the fuck? Who the hell does that? I guess a killer does that. That makes sense. But really, right in fucking broad daylight, how sloppy. The reactions to Gucci's death were very mixed. Of course, everyone was sad. A lot of people were like, oh my goodness, how could this happen? But then other people were like, it's not a matter of how could Gucci have enemies, it's more like which of Gucci's enemies finally brought him down. Some people are like, maybe this is the mafia. It wouldn't be that far-fetched for the Gucci's to have ties with them somehow. But then after just a couple minutes, police realized that had this been a professional killer, they would have done literally anything not to be noticed. Yet 3 witnesses saw this shit go down in broad daylight. So they ruled the mafia out, and police start digging more into the Gucci family themselves. Like, yeah, this guy was famous, but that doesn't automatically make you a target. I mean, if that were the case, every celebrity would have been taken out by now. Well, now there was word going around town that this could have been because of a family vendetta from years ago. Like, honey, there were shitstorms flying from every angle with this family. It was crazy. But police were also finding that there was some fierce hatred between Maurizio and his ex-wife Patrizia that was still burning pretty hot even a decade after he left her. And I guess the little tiff between those two wasn't the only bad blood in the family. Apparently, regular brawls and catfights were pretty frequent between the members, and at one point, I guess there was designer handbags thrown all over the Gucci lawn because the family members were just hurling them at each other in a heated argument. That was probably the most expensive and beautiful fight ever. Like, you know, my ass would just be sitting there behind a tree waiting for one of them to look away so I can snag me some rent money. The cops are like, obviously shit gets shaken with the Guccis real often and real quick. Maybe we should be looking at the family for a motive. So they start their investigation right at the beginning of the Gucci fame in 1921. They started with Guccio Gucci. That was actually his real name, Guccio Gucci. That's like calling somebody Tammy O Tammy. I'm not here to name shame, but it's just a very interesting choice. Anyways, he started his little family journey with a small leather goods shop in Florence that really mainly catered to the rich. Like, if you were anybody who wanted to be somebody, you went to Guccio Gucci. And it was actually really smart because the area was really well known for its artisan craftsmanship, so he was able to employ the best of the best and keep the quality consistent, like, even up to today. Like, you gotta admit, their shit is still fucking banging. It's the quality, man. It's just, I will cheers to that. But over the span of like 20 years, Guccio really grew his company from this small operation to a large scale. So much so that Gucci could actually hire on his 3 sons to help run the business. Well, now with fresh young eyes in the company, the sons were like, yo, daddy-o Guccio, we need to expand. Things are really hopping in New York City. This would be the perfect spot for another store. Like, let's fucking do it. Guccio was like, why? We can just stay in Italy. But the sons were like, nah, dad, trust us. In New York, we'd have 100 times the opportunities that we could ever have here. Like, let's just do it. And at this point, they were very financially stable. So yes, it was a risk, but even if it tanked, they could afford the failure. So they loaded up their truck and they moved to Beverly. Wait, no, sorry, wrong story. They moved to New York. The wig's a little tight. I'm getting confused up in here. Oh, you know what? Maybe so much hair wouldn't blow into my face if my fan wasn't blowing right at my wig. Whew. Anywho, now we all know that that move to New York was about the best damn thing they ever could have done. Suddenly, they weren't just catering to the rich, but also the elite, celebrities, famous CEOs. Unlike in Italy, in New York, people didn't come to Gucci to become somebody. People who came to Gucci were already somebody. Around the world, suddenly Gucci became a household name. People aspired to own a Gucci piece. Some people just aspired to go into a Gucci store. Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra were now walking around town in Gucci shoes, and before you know it, the Gucci family is schmoozing with princesses and countesses and celebrities from around the world. And this feeling was addicting for the family. Like, you can't just be partying with royalty one day and then stop the next day. You gotta keep that train rolling, baby. It was like heaven for the family. Finally, all of their hard work paid off and they were living it up. At the time, the power was perfectly balanced between Guccio and the sons, and everyone really worked harmoniously. That is, until the sons began having children. One son had 3 sons and another, Rodolfo, had one whose name was Maurizio. And even though Maurizio was surrounded by riches and anything that he could want, he grew up kind of a sad boy. He was very lonesome because he had no siblings to play with, and his mother died when he was like 5. And because Maurizio was really all Rodolfo now had, he was very protective of his son and kept him like overly sheltered. And apparently Rodolfo was actually a very well-known actor who appeared in over 40 Italian films with the stage name of Maurizio, and then ended up naming his son after that name. Like, get a theater queen. But as Maurizio grew up, shit really started to go pear-shaped because the balances of power just began to adjust. There was now more people to divide the company by. So now Maurizio and his dad Rodolfo owned half of the company, and then the other half had to be divided by the uncle and the 3 cousins. So I guess there were feelings like, we are literally at the same level and should be equals, yet you make more than I do and have more power. And so this just started like a big war between the family. And then to add to that stress, even though this was a family operation that was handed down, it seems like the elder Guccis kind of failed to mention to the youngins all of the financial secrets that they had. Their bank account was big, but that vault of secrets, it was bigger. Well, one day, one of the cousins, Paulo, was looking into the old sales records and was like, hold the fuck up. Why in 1978 did the US Gucci shop show that we had $48 million in sales, but we have no profit? Like, bitch, make it make sense. Do you get it? No, I didn't think so. And Paulo really kept prying into this, not realizing that almost all of the $48 million had been siphoned into offshore accounts by his dad and his uncle. Like, that's a big whoopsie. He was not supposed to stumble on that. Paulo, of course, eventually found out what happened to this money and spent sleepless nights pilfering through documents and records until he finally found the proof that he needed. And what does he do? His ass brings his uncle and his dad to the US courts. Money, honey, it is not cute. Well, the court really has no choice other than to favor Paulo, and so he sends his own 81-year-old father to spend an entire year of his life in jail. I mean, obviously there was some shady shit going on in the family, but I feel like a normal family just would have talked this out. But not this family. They went straight for the danglers and only had money on their minds. Like, if putting a family member in jail or even taking them out meant a higher profit, I wouldn't put it past them. But I bet you they throw a good party. But Paulo really wasn't the only shit stirrer here. Maurizio, the quiet and shy cousin, had fallen head over designer heels over a woman named Patrizia Reggiani, who also seemed to have a steaming pile of horseshit to contribute, so yay for that. Patrizia, she was, I guess, a whoopsie child between a wealthy baron and a waitress. The waitress eventually married the baron, which guaranteed Patrizia a life of riches and privilege, so in her eyes, she was pretty much on the same wealth level as Maurizio, but she was still a nobody in that she had no social status. Like, she knew a connection with the Guccis would put her on the social level that she craved. Plus, Patrizia did look a little bit like Liz Taylor, which had Maurizio smitten. And really, in the beginning, I do think they were truly happy, and Patrizia would later say that they made the perfect team and were just so in love. His dad, Rodolfo, oops, sorry, baby. His dad, Rodolfo, though, really wasn't too keen on this queen. Remember, Maurizio was a parent, but he was like the overbearing parent, and I think Maurizio just kind of had enough of him taking control of his life. And I'm not sure, maybe Rodolfo's dislike of Patrizia may have even fueled his love for her even more. Like, for those of us who have been young and in love, we get it. Defiancy is a very relatable feeling. Rodolfo honestly thought that Patrizia was basically a gold-digging potato. Not necessarily just for the money, but more so the Gucci name and the fortune, and I mean, he wasn't that wrong, was he? Although that's getting ahead of ourselves, let's strap our titties back and reel it in. Rodolfo really wasn't shy about letting his son know how he felt about his girlfriend, but Maurizio wouldn't have anyone tear her down like that, and he started standing up to his father for the first time probably ever. And then, to really piss off his dad, what's he go and do? He marries Patrizia. Oh my bloody taint. If I were the parent, I'd be livid. Especially because Maurizio had such an incredibly privileged life, so he may not have known like real life repercussions. It's not like when you're a kid and you put a bottle tab on some random girl's finger that you just met in the park. And I get where Rodolfo was coming from, because at least he didn't grow up around, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, so he kind of had some idea what normal was. Where it seems his son appeared to be in a little bit of a fairy tale world. Well, when the news of Maurizio and Patrizia's marriage made its way to Rodolfo, of course, he didn't take too kindly to this. In fact, he was so pissed that he didn't speak to Maurizio for months. But I suppose even if you're a Gucci, family is family, and one family member convinced them to kiss and make up, and Rodolfo's like, come here, my child, let's make peace and pasta. Meh. So the family business continues, it flourishes, and meanwhile, Patrizia is busy molding Maurizio like a fucking work of art. Not exactly like the Patrick Swayze sculpting scene in Ghost, but she turned him into a corporate mogul, or I guess more so made him want to become one. She introduced him to all the right elites and really escalated his career, and despite this career advancement, the Gucci family really still never accepted her. Like, she'd fit into the crowd at a party, but she just didn't fit into the family. Like, she was egocentric, she was conceited, a total prima donna, and just waltzing into a family that's already dysfunctional as fuck and saying, okay, well, I'ma take over now. That shit didn't fly too well, as one could imagine. But I'm actually a little bit surprised because the Gucci family cared more about money than familial bond. Like, obviously, they had no issue putting their relatives in jail and would have like 20 different lawsuits going at a time. So when someone comes into the family and presents ideas to make this empire even larger, you'd think the family would just welcome them in with open arms. But of course, no, the family just wanted money, and to keep that money within their own walls. They wanted fame and fortune and everything that goes with it, so the young Guccis with dollar signs in their eyes decided to sell their double G logo to literally anyone that would buy it. Like, if a manufacturer was offering enough cash, the Gucci logo would be theirs, which, as you can imagine, really really kind of cheapened the brand. Like, yeah, they were making money because all these manufacturers were paying good money for the logo, but the point of a high-end brand is that it's difficult for just anyone to attain, and suddenly everyone and their fucking housekeeper's dog could afford some type of Gucci, whether it was a keychain or a pad of paper. And if everyone can have it, then nobody wants it. Like, popularity doesn't equate success in the long run, and Maurizio was starting to take a look at the numbers and saying, we gotta stop this shit. Like, we need to become an exclusive brand again and stop being sellouts just for money. Which I totally understand both business aspects, like they want to make a lot of profit, that's great. However, I kind of favor Maurizio's way of thinking because he was thinking into the future versus in the moment like the rest of the family. Yes, in the moment they were making dough faster than they could spend it, but what happens when everyone has a Gucci item and nobody cares about the brand anymore? Shit's just gonna tank, and this family business is like all they have. It needs to last for generations to come. Cheers to you for that one, Maurizio. That is smart. So, of course, the family calls a business meeting, and of course, Paolo brings a little tape recorder for legal purposes. Everything is always about legality with this family, but nobody really knows what happened during the meeting. It's just said that there was a kerfuffle. Someone tried to grab the recorder, and Paolo somehow ended up with a huge scratch on his face near his eye. At this point, he grabs his tape recorder, flies out of the room, runs out of the building, and all the passersby on the streets are just sucking up the Gucci drama like it was fucking liquid gold. Paolo serves his family with a $2 million lawsuit saying that his brothers and his family held him down and beat him up. Like, what the actual fuck? But honestly, there is so much more to that story, and it's only like one of hundreds like it. The family was fucking crazy, and it was kind of weird because a lot of brands would tank the moment they had a public scandal, but every Gucci family scandal just made their brand become even more popular. People were just fascinated by the Guccis because they had everything that most humans want: family, friends, status, money, yet they were so unhappy and were always finding new ways to tear each other to shreds. And I think the public liked seeing this so much because it just proves to you that money and success doesn't bring you happiness. And I think people found some sort of comfort in knowing that even though their bank account would never be as supple as the Gucci's, at least they were happy with their lives and could sit back, eat their TV dinners, and watch these elite lives just go to shit. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. Like, Maurizio really wanted to reclaim the company's prestigious status, but the cousins just wanted to sell their trademark to every Dick and Harry that would buy it. Or every Harry Dick that would buy it. You never know. However, the time for rebuilding their status was absolute perfection. By now it was like the 1980s, and the fashion world had really taken notice of Italy. Suddenly Milan was the new Paris, and Maurizio knew that Gucci could be an absolute pillar in this sudden wave of high fashion, and he knew that would only happen if they reverted to upscale clientele again. So when Maurizio's dad Rodolfo passed away in 1983, Maurizio inherited the entire half of the company, as well as just a humble $230 million. And Patrizio, remember her, she was at the height of her human molding at this point and really encouraged Maurizio to seize control of the brand and redefine the label as being geared towards the super rich. And I'm not going to defend her, but it honestly does make sense. I get it. But Maurizio only owned half the company. His cousins and uncle, who owned the other half, would not budge. They liked the company as it was because it was easy money, it was a constant cash flow. They were rich and greedy, but Maurizio was like, if we keep putting our name on literally everything, momentum is gonna crash, money's gonna go downhill, and the gravy train is just gonna dry up. And while Maurizio was fighting for his family's company with Patrizia in his ear, she's in his other ear saying, you don't have time for your daughters, you don't have time for me, you're a terrible father, you're not doing enough of this, you're not doing enough of that, and basically she was saying she could do so much better, blah, blah, blah. In the beginning, I do really think that they married for love, but later on, I think she loved the glitz and the glamour more than she could love any human being. Patrizia's bitching to him left and right, Maurizio has his foot out the door one toe at a time, and Miss Thing over here had no idea that their marriage was about to blow the fuck up. Maurizio was starting to realize how manipulative Patrizia was being, and one day he was like, fuck this, fuck you, I'm out of here, deuces. So he packed an overnight bag, told Patrizia and his girls that he was just going down to the Florence Gucci factory for a business trip, kissed Patrizia on the head, kissed his girls goodbye, and never came back. Needless to say, Patrizia was gobsmacked. She felt blindsided. Surely you can imagine the shock when she realized that she might have to give up her $800 house slippers and $5,000 shopping sprees and daily visits to the spas because her husbando wasn't providing her a lavish life anymore. Oh no, what is one to do? Well, after the separation, she keeps a suspiciously close eye on all of his finances. After all, even if she didn't get any of his money, at least their children would, and she wanted to make sure he didn't dry the bank account up. Like, heaven forbid she leave the kids anything. No, it has to be all all his money. But Maurizio used his time away to reconstruct the brand and give it a plan to flourish. And just as he was about to pull that trigger, he was about to go through with the rebranding plan, and his pissed off cousin Paolo dropped a big titty-sized bombshell. He took documents to the police showing that Maurizio had purchased his multi-million-dollar boat using funds from his father's old offshore accounts, which put him in hot water for tax evasion. Like, this family really just goes for the jugular and they don't fuck around. So when authorities show up to Maurizio's house, he hops his little ass onto his motorcycle and flees to his country villa up in the Swiss Alps. I mean, haven't we all done the same? So now Maurizio's like, how the fuck am I gonna get my family out of this family business? He was calling them, asking to buy them out and get full ownership, but they just weren't having it. And why would they? It was like a constant cash flow. Like, they'd have to be crazy to give that up. They literally have to do no work except sell their logos to manufacturers that want to buy it, and boom, paycheck. But Maurizio found an investment group that was actually interested in Gucci and would help convince the family to sell. And Maurizio knew exactly which chain link was the weakest and should be approached first. Paolo. Paolo really hated Maurizio, like really hated him. But he loathed his brothers and his father even more, so to no one's surprise, Paolo sold his shares out of spite and revenge. And Maurizio now had over 50% of the company, which basically makes the other shareholders' opinions garbage. So it'd really only be a matter of time till the rest of the family sold their 10 or 15% out to the investment company as well. And for a very hot and steamy minute, it seemed like things were really going well for Maurizio. His name had been cleared of any evasion charges, and he was now able to run the company as he saw fit. He was the only remaining Gucci in the brand. He brought on Tom Ford as the head designer, and suddenly Gucci was more than expensive bags and shoes. They were now a high fashion clothing house as well, which sounds like an excellent plan, does it not? High fashion? Count me in, mama. Strap on a parrot and call it a day. Well, unfortunately, what goes up must come down, and Maurizio really had wonderful intentions, but he just did too much too quickly, and he made way too many changes in a short amount of time. Like, part of the brand's relaunch as a high-end company was to immediately get rid of all cheap licensing that his cousins had allowed, which made up like 90% of Gucci profits. So doing away with that made for a loss of $100 million company dollars and $40 million of Maurizio's personal dollars. I say personal dollars in quotes because it wasn't even his money. The company was just really sinking fast, and they were going into what seemed like irreversible debt. He was running the company past the ground and like straight into the basement. At this point, Maurizio owed the bank millions and millions of dollars, and they were getting pissed, like they wanted their money. But then suddenly, he had the money. How? Well, by borrowing it from one of the most wanted men who was also an accused terrorist and was on the run from the police. So Maurizio was like, okay, I gotta cut back. Of course, he still kept both the Ferraris, his yacht, his Swiss chalet, but slashed Patrizia's monthly allowance from $150,000 to a mere $90,000. And oh my god, she was fuming. Like, how is anyone supposed to live on anything less than $100,000 a month? Oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Simply preposterous, like serious broke bitch problems, for real. But was the $60,000 a month pay cut enough to justify killing him? Maurizio was like, honestly, I have way more important things to tend to than my bitter ex's lush life. He had found that his transition of power made him more enemies than friends, and he was continuing to run the business almost into bankruptcy. He was still convinced, though, that he could turn it around and take the company higher than it had ever been before. And a talented man Maurizio surely was, he didn't inherit his grandfather's business sense. Like, his grandpa was the driving force behind the start of the company. The sons were the forces behind expanding globally, but by the third generation, any knowledge of business kind of flew out the door. At this point, they were already so well established, so Maurizio and the cousins didn't need to learn how to take a company from the ground up. Maurizio was at rock bottom and he had no idea what the fuck to do. So by 1993, the business was now hemorrhaging money. The investment company tried to stop the bleeding by letting go of Maurizio. After all, they joined on to fix the company and not have a little trickle of profit here and there. They had their eyes on the prize with like serious big dick energy and wanted the big bucks. And so for the first time, there were no Gucci's within the brand. Maurizio ended up parting with a gift of $120 million for his shares, and he was happy with that, as anyone should be. But you know which money-hungry chickapoo wasn't happy with this? I'll give you two guesses. guesses, but I'm sure you'll only need one. Yes, it was Miss Patrizia, because you know what? $120 million just isn't enough to comfortably live on for the rest of their lives. Like, they'd be on the streets in no time. Or more importantly, she'd be on the streets. Her income from Maurizio had already been sliced down. Now her status as Gucci heiress was crumbling around her, and this was so freaking embarrassing for Patrizia. Like, she couldn't be the first lady of Gucci if there was no Gucci. After all, she had spent so much time molding Maurizio into the businessman that rebuilt the Gucci empire. She deserved her name attached to that family because, damn it, she was responsible for all of Maurizio's success that he just threw the fuck away. Alright class, who knows how to spell delusional? So, to make herself feel better, Patrizia throws an elegant, over-the-top, lavish birthday party for one of her daughters, and while schmoozing with the guests, just slipped it in that she was gonna teach Maurizio a lesson. Ooh, honey, don't get behind a pissed-off ex. At that party, she ended up asking a famous lawyer what would happen if she got rid of Maurizio. He kinda laughed and brushed the question off because, like, what the fuck kind of a question is that? And so, when she asked the lawyer the same question again a month later, he wrote back telling her that she needs to stop fucking around and quit asking him this kind of bullshit. So what does her ass do? Talk even louder about wanting to off her ex-husband. She went to everyone she knew, family, friends, household staff, the husband of the cleaning lady, asking if anyone would be willing to kill Maurizio. Like, how big of a demand is this? Is this too much to ask? I think not. And in the blink of an eye, she became obsessed with this notion. Like, all she could think about day and night was having Maurizio killed. Like, this was bitter X to, like, the nth degree. She resented him for leaving her. She couldn't stand that her social status was deteriorating. She wanted this man dead so she could regain her Queen Gucci title, damn it. And this thought absolutely consumed her. Like, you and I would daydream about winning the lottery or going to Disney World. She would daydream about all the ways she could take out Maurizio and what she'd spend his money on. Her head was so overcome with all of these thoughts until one day the thoughts were replaced by debilitating headaches. And she thought, fuck my diamond rings with a Gucci leather whip, this shit isn't normal. And after days of just mind-numbing pain, Patrizia finally goes to the hospital and was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a billiard ball. That's pretty fucking big. Doctors were like, we gotta get this shit out, like, right now. And on the day of her surgery, Maurizio wasn't anywhere to be found. Turns out the tumor was benign, but the doctors requested that Maurizio not make an appearance because it could stress her the fuck out. So instead of showing up, he sent some flowers, and literally all the card said was his name, which really pissed her off. It wasn't like, get well soon, it wasn't love you lots, it was Maurizio. Ooh, cold. And she was really upset over this. It kind of seemed like there was a serious love-hate relationship going on. Like, she wanted his support and for him to be there to comfort her and to love her, but she also just wanted his money. And if he wasn't gonna give her any of that shit, then he was more valuable to her dead than he was alive. But at this point, he really didn't want to be with Patrizia. Like, he sent her the flowers just as a kind gesture, but clearly he didn't give a rat's fat ass about her anymore. And this just really made Patrizia so upset. Like, she was allowed to hate people, but if anybody didn't like her, oh my god, it was like, fuck this guy. To her, this was just one of the hundreds of ways that he'd screwed her over, and she could see there was nothing left to this relationship except for the Gucci name. And so that night in Patrizia's journal, all she wrote was the word vengeance. The bitch was mad before, but now she was out for blood. And that day, after a nearly 10-year separation, their divorce became final. Like, ooh, ouch. I don't know about you, but I personally would be pleased as a tickled titty if I were given a yearly stipend, a few houses in Milan, New York City, Monte Carlo, literally anything that I could ever want. But Miss Patrizia called this a mere plate of lentils, and this meat-hungry money hoe wasn't gonna stop at anything short of filet mignon. And to top her anger off, Maurizio was simply flourishing. Yes, he'd been let go of Gucci, but he attained a new lease on life. His skin was glowing. Every day was a good hair day. He had a new girlfriend who appeared not to be so new. It seems he may have dabbled a little bit outside of the marital mattress, if you know what I'm saying. Which, of course, also added to Patrizia's anger, which, I mean, at least that shit is justified. But now he and his new gal had moved in together. They were renovating a giant-ass apartment in Milan, filling it with the finest furnishings and art, paintings made with caviar and the tears of Persian puppies, all the works, and the couple would travel the world looking for specific pieces, and travel ain't cheap when you're high-class bitches, I would assume. But if they weren't flying first class or renting an entire plane, they were sailing in Maurizio's luxury boat, which happened to be the largest wooden sailboat in the world. Of fucking course it was. And they had a few little renovations going. How much did the boat renovations cost? A mere $25 million. Just a drop in that gold-plated bucket. The big-ass apartment alone was almost $25K a month, and ooh, Patrizia was livid. Not only because her ex-man found new love, but because she was worried they were going to spend all of the money that that she felt should be hers. Like, what if this new girl has children? Then they'd inherit all that cash and there'd be nothing left for her. Because again, nearly $1 million a year for the rest of your life simply isn't enough, especially if there needs to be money left for her daughters to inherit. But in her defense, Maurizio was spending faster than he could earn it. After all, he'd not really had a job since he'd been fired from Gucci, so there wasn't like a steady flowing income to make his new girlfriend and his ex-wife happy. But Maurizio didn't know any different. Like, he grew up with wealth and surrounded himself with the best of the best because he could, and that's just how he fucking rolled. Like, he still had millions from his Gucci buyout, but Patrizia's head was just fucking boiling when she saw he was using it to make risky investments. Which, again, not to defend Patrizia, but like, I get that. She knew Maurizio was, I wouldn't say a lousy businessman, but certainly not a good one. And having nearly ran a global company into the ground, she knew that risky business investments really weren't a really good idea for this fella. Like, that monthly stipend can't last forever if there's no cash to give. And then the vacation homes will have to start being sold to pay for things, and before you know it, she's just one of us normal peasants shopping at Nordstrom Rack. But if Maurizio was somehow magically out of the picture, there'd be no one to spend the money, make silly business investments, and spend $250,000 a year on some apartment with some girl. So Patrizia turns to her bestie boo, a woman named Pina, like Pina Colada, but we're gonna call her Panini. Anyways, Patrizia asks for her advice. Both of these friends had a huge love for tarot cards and psychics and really put a lot of faith into these methods of fortune telling. I guess they even tiptoed a little bit in the dark arts and black magic, but I don't think at any point they were like super serious about it. Media gets a hold of this information, calls Panini a black witch, and basically says they're both shooting spells out their hooters left and right, trying to manipulate the Gucci family with this magic. Manipulate, yes, but with magic, probably not. They knew that if Maurizio was to be murdered, it would be by their own accord, or at least by somebody they could hire to pull the trigger, so just like that, Patrizia was planning a murder. Panini scrounged up her contacts and felt that the best option for finding someone to take Maurizio out would be to go to the sleazy doorman she found at a sketchy-ass hotel in the nastiest part of Milan. He was just a petty little thief, but he told Panini that he could find someone to do the job as long as they had a down payment. Patrizia's like, yeah, whatever, fine, here's my money. She had no problem forking it over for that cause, but she'll be damned if she lets Maurizio spend his own money. But soon a few days turned into a few weeks, those weeks turned into months, and Patrizia's like, why the fuck is Maurizio still alive? Like, what a bitch gotta do? So Panini was like, girl, I ain't up for this middleman shit. How about I introduce you to the doorman and you can work your shit out? So she meets the doorman, and in typical Patrizia fashion, this whole show was immediately in full swing. Like, you gotta admit, she is absolutely the villain in this story, or at least one of the villainous characters, but she gets shit done like mama doesn't play. So on that day, March 27th of 1995 at 8:30 a.m., a gunman followed Maurizio into his office building and put 4 bullets into his body and vanished into his getaway car. Once again, who the fuck does that in broad daylight? Meh. Witnesses, which there were witnesses, they all said the shooter looked like a 40 to 45-year-old man in a jean jacket and a baseball cap. And police knew that Maurizio had way more enemies than he did friends, but his girlfriend was the first to point a finger, and I won't say which finger, but she pointed it at Patrizia. After all, at this point, it really wasn't a secret that she had wanted Maurizio killed, but also, can you imagine that? Like, knowing that there are people that want you dead and would go to the extreme of hiring a hitman on you? Like, my goodness, I would never sleep. I'd be in a bunker a mile underground with cheese puffs and muffins till I die. But though Patrizia does get shit done, she is very sloppy, as if we didn't know this already. It's not like she waltzed around town asking literally anyone to kill her ex-husband or anything. Oh wait, her ass thought she was above the law, and to add to her sloppiness, on the day of the murder, she made yet another journal entry that translated to the word paradise. Like, girl, if you're gonna plan a murder, don't fucking document that shit. Come on. Like, all you have to do is watch one Dateline episode to know the basics. And she couldn't even do that. But she was on a mission. The day after he died, Patrizia stormed into their luxury apartment Maurizio and his girlfriend had been renovating and served her with eviction papers, which had been filed a mere 3 hours after he died. The girlfriend was to collect her shit and GTFO because there was a new cowgirl in town, and I'm sure you can guess who? Yeah, it's Miss Patty. How you doing, Birdie? You doing okay? She's looking a little bit droopy, but aren't we all? A little time goes on and Patrizia's living large in her new luxury apartment. Meanwhile, investigators are trying to figure out who the fuck killed Maurizio. Of course, Patrizia was a suspect, but remember, he had so many freaking enemies, it could be 1,000 different people. And police were still going back and forth with the mafia thing, but then they'd remind themselves the mafia isn't this sloppy. Like, they certainly would not have committed a murder in broad daylight and then gotten shot. But police police don't know where to look, so 2 whole years go by. Everyone knows that Patrizia had something to do with it, but nobody could prove exactly what she did. So this giant scandal that had worldwide publicity was baffling everyone, even though everyone knew who did it. That is, until a down-and-out restaurateur called into the police station saying he could link all of the people involved with Maurizio Gucci's death. Ooh, shit, honey, we're getting juicy. So the police chief meets this man who turned out to be friends with both Panini and the sketchy-ass doorman that hooked her up with the hitman. And he said that he heard a man named Ivano bragging about his involvement with the Gucci murder. Is he blowing smoke up people's asses for attention? Who knows? But either way, the police had only dead ends, so this was really valuable and the only information that they had. Apparently, Panini called the doorman, who called the owner of a local pizzeria, who called a mechanic that lived behind the restaurant, and this mechanic agreed to do the deed. So Patrizia, who has actual millions of dollars at her very disposal, didn't hire some expensive-ass hitman who would leave no traces of anything behind and no pathways to them or Patrizia. No, Miss Pennypincher hires the mechanic behind Little Caesars. Like, she is the reason why the word cheapassery was invented. And get this, she deadass thought her plan was in the bag. She had this. There is no way anything could ever be traced back to her. Girl, just come the fuck on. Nuh-uh, But also, 2 years in that luxury apartment, that was pretty damn nice, especially because she thought she'd gotten away with murder the whole damn time. Little did she know the cops were actually on her ass, and on January 31st of 97, at the early hour of 4 a.m., cops think, oh, let's surprise her with the arrest. They bang on her door, Patrizia answers and says, hold on, please wait a moment. And she came back fully glammed up with head-to-toe furs, all of her diamonds on, which paired very well with her silver handcuffs. Of fucking course. Which actually, now that I think of it, may have been kind of smart, because if they did end up taking everything away from her, like all of her money, at least she could keep what she went to jail with and sell it afterwards. So maybe she's kind of smart with that. She gets to jail, is of course stripped of everything, and for the first time, possibly ever, she becomes the same as everyone else. Suddenly, she was no more important than anyone in there. She was equal, if not at the bottom of the totem pole. And I guess she kind of cried a lot in jail too. I don't think I feel bad. I mean, she did sound like a very good business person, but that doesn't cancel out being a selfish monster and a murderer, or taking part in a murder. Whatever though, it's now been 3 years since Maurizio was murdered, and Panini and Patrizia are just sitting patiently awaiting their trials. But in the months leading up to the trials, Patrizia's jail cell ends up being raided, and police found very incriminating documents. Why those documents were there, I'm not quite sure, but shit really hit the fan at full speed from there. What were these documents, you're wondering? Well, they were the bank statements that showed the exact withdrawals for the exact amount that the hitman said they'd received. That's a big fucking uh-oh, baby. Which was just another indication that she thought money could buy you happiness and solve all your problems. And if that wasn't bad enough, Miss Panini, Patrizia's supposed best friend, blabbed on her. She was in just as big of a pickle as Patrizia and was not coping to jail life very well either. Patrizia did tell Panini that if you keep quiet, your jail cell will be showered in gold. One could say a golden shower. But what good is having gold behind bars? It's like having stacks of cash on a deserted island. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do with that? So Panini's lawyer was like, listen girl, cooperate and you'll get a deal. After all, a life sentence is no small bag of tater tots. So 3 months before the trial, she's like, okay, yes, fuck it, I will cooperate totally and tell you anything you want to know. And the media was having a freaking heyday, like they were sucking this shit up. This was a drama-filled family that never failed to top the last story, and everyone loved it. The news was always talking about Patrizia's lawyers. Now they were wondering how the fuck they were gonna get her off when she clearly had Vegas-style lighted red arrows pointing directly at her. Like, to think it wasn't Patrizia would be ludicrous. Unless you're her lawyer, probably the only person, including Patrizia, that said she didn't do it. But no, said her lawyer, how could she have done it? After all, around the time of Maurizio's murder, she had just had her brain tumor surgery. There would be no time for her to plan a murder when she was simply too busy recovering. Plus, she wouldn't have been in a right state of mind anyways. Cue the major eye roll. Like, can you see my eyes? Are they just white? Major fucking eye roll. Well, honey, I hope you've been doing Kegels, because otherwise you're gonna shit yourself when you hear her second defense. Not only did she say she wasn't capable of planning a murder, she throws Panini's ass under the bus and said that Panini planned the whole thing and she, Patrizia, had nothing to do with it. In fact, Panini came to her asking for money to help fund this bullshit. Patrizia was out telling every Sally, Bob, and Margaret around town that she wanted this man dead and will literally hire anyone's cousin to kill him. him. And now she's done a full 180? And not only that, but Panini said that if she didn't get the money, she would blackmail her by going public and physically harming her daughters. The gay gasp of it all. Oh, I simply can't contain myself. What is one to do? Yeah, well, it didn't take very long for the jury members to smell that bullshit wafting off Patrizia. Her case really went to hell in a handbag when the escaped car driver confessed as well, hoping for leniency with his jail time. Obviously, things aren't really going that great for Patrizia, so she decided to play the innocent good girl in court. She did away with her jewels and her furs and replaced them with plain slacks and a rosary around her neck. But honey, it would take more than a few rounds of Hail Marys to get her ass out of this barrel of pickles. And after just 7 hours, the jury found everyone involved Gucci guilty. Cheers to that. Everyone except for the gunman, who ended up getting life in prison, received between 25 and 29 years. Patrizia wanted to be the head of Gucci, and instead she was the head of a sloppy-ass murder scheme, so she got the full 29. But with good behavior, she could still be out while she's in her 60s. And I guess her jail time was really kind of hellish. It certainly wasn't the palace she was used to. She'd been attacked several times by inmates and had suffered many seizures from the tumor surgery. This definitely wasn't what Patrizia had pictured her life to be. She had just wanted what she thought was best for her daughters, which was to have an inheritance, and now, when she was out of prison, she'd have to rely on her daughter's inheritance herself. Like, had she just sat her ass down and been grateful for what she'd been gifted, she could have been sipping limoncello on her balcony in Italy. But instead, she was locked up in a jail cell. And while Patrizia was serving her time, one of her daughters really promoted that her mom was innocent and was saying that Panini was to blame for this. And this case affected her so much that she herself began studying law to try to free her mom. But jail gave Patrizia a lot of time to sleep, and she was actually allowed to have plants. And her lawyer even negotiated the right to have her ferret Bambi stay with her as a special privilege. Unfortunately, though, the ferret did pass away because one of her fellow inmates sat on it, so that's sad. But after over 20 years in prison, she was offered a deal for an early release if she could find a job. Just the very idea of working disgusted her so much that she said no. Can you fucking imagine? Like, you'd rather be in prison than work? But eventually she did come around. She took a job at a famous jeweler, and she's really not been that quiet about her part in the murder either. Like, when somebody asked why she didn't just shoot him, she said her eyesight wasn't good enough and she didn't want to miss. I guess at least she's honest. But get this, shiz, even after years of this fiasco happening, she still considers herself a Gucci and would love nothing more than to be offered a creative role in the company. My dear, don't hold your breath. But before we close, just as a little add-in, we shan't forget what Maurizio brought to Gucci, because he may have made some poor business choices, yes. But at the end of the day, he was a Gucci and had the family's creativity in his blood, so he absolutely brought a lot to the company. I think it would be a shame to let the crazy story of Patrizia ending his life outshine the things that he did during his life. Like, without him, Gucci certainly wouldn't be back at the luxurious level that they're at today. So I guess the direction of some of his choices honestly were good and applaudable, so you go. As for Patrizia, she's still around now and is trying to live her best life. You never know, you might even spot her walking the streets with a parrot perched on her shoulder. Maybe even looking a little bit like that. What do you think? So yeah, let me tell you right the fuck now, Google this shit. The amount that I had to leave out saddens me to no end. But if you have a moment of free time, just read a single article about this case or the family and you will be enthralled. I guarantee it. So yeah, there's our little story. Much different than our other stories, but still very, very interesting. I still can't believe all of the craziness that happened. And also the fact that people who are watching this unfold were just looking at it as entertainment when somebody's life actually ended because of all this. Humans are just a weird species. Much rather be a parrot. Our tale starts with Stephen and Jody Sharf. They were a couple pretty seemingly in love. To the outside eye, you would think that they're just like a match made in fucking heaven. It was disgusting. No, it just seemed like the kind of relationship that everybody wants. You look at them and you're like, I want that. I feel like most couples have a favorite restaurant or a favorite song or a favorite dance or something. They had a favorite place. They called it a rock. It was in the Palisades, which is in New Jersey. But the Palisades is like a huge set of boulders with a big old cliff cliff overlooking the Hudson. You can see New York's skyscrapers off in the distance. And this is a public park, like anybody can go to it, but I guess there's a bunch of little trails that veer off and you can find your own little love shack style thing. Or in their case, a perfect love seat shaped rock. It's kind of like this, and then there's a huge drop off. I think it was like maybe 10 stories, I don't know. For years, they would come here, they would bring food, they would bring lawn chairs, they would bring blankets, wine, and just make a day out of sitting out at their rock. When I was watching interviews, they described this place with such a passion, like this was the place that they would escape reality. There's something different about the air, it was crisper and cleaner and fresher, and they always came back feeling revitalized. And if you've ever seen the Palisades, they are just so damn pretty. It's like something out of a Thomas Kincaid picture, just stunning. Sounds like my kind of place. Give me a bottle of wine, a joint, and I'll be set for a month. But also, if they knew the fuckery that was going to be happening there soon, they probably would take their asses out of there and never return. But that's us getting ahead of ourselves. So, Jody and Steven, who the fuck are they? Oh god, I hope they smelled better than Cody Earspun. Steven and Jody met in Georgia sometime in the late 70s. Steven was a huge book nerd, like a total geek for history, specifically, I think, World War I. Nope, it was the Civil War, but he just had a huge appreciation and respect for the history, which made he and Jody a perfect couple because, get this, she was a history teacher. They instantly clicked, but it wasn't like the love at first sight kind of thing. I think their minds connected and then their hearts kind of followed shortly after. They seemed madly in love, like a love that comes once in a lifetime. After their hearts finally fall in love, they keep going on more dates, they eventually get married, they buy a house, they have a kid in 1983 named Jonathan, and their love was strong. Like, it lasted through shit at work, through family drama, just everything that comes with life and relationships. All of the juicy bits. The parts they don't show you in the fairy tales. But between all of life's dramas and bullshit, they still made time for each other. They would go on dates, they would still have, like, couple time. Steven made it seem like it was really important for them to find the value in each other and maintain that, and they would find appreciation in each other by going on dates, which is exactly what they were doing on the last week of September in 1992. It was just like any other day because they lived in New Jersey. They could pretty much go to Manhattan anytime they wanted, so they thought they'd go to Manhattan, maybe go to a club, get a few drinks. I think eventually they were gonna make their way to a comedy club that night, but they thought maybe we'll take a little bit of a pit stop to our little spot, The Rock. Sounds nice, sounds romantic. They're gonna go downtown and then go down to Pound Town. I am here for all of this, you go. When they arrived, at the main entrance is like a little lookout thing where you can put a quarter in and view the city, in like those dirty ass binoculars that everybody pushes their face to. There were lots of other people there, but they didn't really pay attention to any of them. They just had eyes for each other. They finally moseyed their way down to their secret little stone to canoodle. It just seems very romantic, like the sun is setting over the river. Steven has his back up against the rock and Jody's sitting in front of him, and they're both just peering out over the water. Oh my gosh, that just sounds like it's from a movie. There was a nice cool breeze. It was just a moment. So Steven decided maybe I should go to the car and get a few of the items that I packed for our little picnic. So Steven tells Jody, okay, I'm gonna go grab a blanket because it was a little bit chilly out. He stands up, Jody's still in front of him. He climbs over the edge towards the car and he looks back, and the last thing he remembers seeing is Jody being there, and suddenly she wasn't. He said right after he stood up, she did as well, and she was very, very close to the edge, but they had done this so many times that being close to the edge really didn't mean anything. But this time I guess it did, because he just witnessed Jody fall 12 stories down the cliff to the rocks below, and he was in shock. I mean, I don't know how I would react. I'd probably be like, oh, screaming, but he just stood there trying to comprehend everything, and like, I can't even imagine that. You just watch your loved one fall off a fucking cliff. I would be butt fucking hysterical. He finally comes to his senses and he's like, oh my god, I gotta help. Like, for all he knew, she could just be a couple feet down below the little cliff because there's lots of little ledges that you can get caught on. But unfortunately, the sun was setting, so it was pretty dark looking down, so he just sat on the ledge looking over with his tummy on the rock, calling her name, but he didn't get any kind of response, like nothing. I just could not imagine. Like, what the fuck? You're having this cute little picnic with Bae and then suddenly Bae's like, bye. Oh god, I just got primer in my hair. This is literally a Something About Mary moment. I always love that on my channel. The best is when I don't realize till I'm done filming. So Steven is yelling down in a freaking panic towards his wife, not getting any kind of response. So of course he does what I would assume anybody would do. He runs up the little path, finds somebody who is driving by, he flags him down, he says, my wife just fell off the cliff. Could you go down to the police station and let them know? So Steven goes back to the rock, this driver driver goes down the hill, down the Palisades, down the cliffs and all that shit, to the little police station who had not had anything interesting happen in fucking years. So this driver frantically throws himself through the doors and is just blubbering about somebody falling off a cliff. I actually think the driver was probably more panic-stricken than Steven himself, but the police instantly grabbed their shit and started making their way up the mountain, and they brought in a mountain climber named Mike. He was very, very experienced, but he didn't really know much about what he was getting into for this case, so he thought this was gonna be a live mission. He was just prepared for it to end in survival. We love a hopeful queen. So he gears up, he starts scaling down the rock, and after about 10 feet, there's a little bit of like a lip out, kind of a little baby ledge, and he saw a woman's purse sitting on top of it. He was like, this is interesting. It's got her credit cards in it, it's got her ID, and he just started to get suspicious. He was like, this is giving me a very odd feeling. And I think what really made him suspicious wasn't what he did see, but more what he didn't see, because there was no evidence of anybody like smacking into that ledge, getting their purse caught, and then falling. It just seemed very odd. Like everything didn't add up because there was no blood, there was no DNA, no hair, any fibers. Just even give me a shoe for fuck's sake. But nothing. It was like Jody didn't even touch the rock. And by now, Officer Walter Siri had made his way up to the scene. He knew Steven was probably not going to be a huge help. I mean, he didn't have gear, he wasn't a climber or anything, so really what purpose does he serve being there? Plus, by now, after the climber had really done some scaling, there were a bunch of red flags popping up. Siri kind of went there thinking, oh, Steven's probably not going to want to come down, he might put up a little bit of a fight, but Steven actually went very willingly, like he almost ran to the car. Okay, maybe he didn't run, but he was very willing. Much more willing than you or I would probably have been. Like, I probably would have stayed up there, wouldn't you have? I don't know if he was thinking, well, she's still alive, they'll bring her down to the police station, but until she's found, I would be like, I am staying right the fuck here, wouldn't you? I don't know, it's suspicious. We should turn this into a drinking game. Next one we do, anytime something sounds suspicious, maybe we should do like a shot or take a drink. Maybe not a shot because there will be no ending to the video. It'll just be a backdrop with me passed out on the floor. But no, Steven went very, very willingly. In fact, when they were in the car, Steven was kind of telling the officer about what had just happened. He said he got up to the car, he looked back, his wife was there, and then suddenly she wasn't. And it did make sense to the officer. I mean, people have slipped before. It's happened actually quite frequently there. And the cops didn't know if maybe there was alcohol or substances involved. He just didn't know enough to make any kind of assumption. Then by the time Siri and Steven actually made it down to the police station, Michael, the rock climber, made it to the bottom of the cliff, where at this point he was kind of expecting to find a mangled body. Like, it was 100 feet. That's a long ass ways to fall, especially if the body is hitting things along the way. So Michael was just preparing himself for what he might see. But a exploded kind of body is not what he found. In fact, he didn't find anything at all. Cue another suspicious shot. Oh, that's what we're gonna call them. We're gonna go grab some wine and we're gonna do suspicious shots. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. This is high octane sweet Moscato. This stuff can really do the trick. It is 17%. Woo! Glug glug, bitch. My goodness, I have not drank in so freaking long. I don't drink very much anymore, only because I gain weight like that when I drink, but I will break my streak with friends, so cheers. So, ooh, wow. Lots of things are suspicious, so it's better if Steven comes down to the police station just so they can get a better understanding of what the hell went down. Okay, where did we leave off? Suspish number like 57? No, suspish like 4, so let's put that up there. Michael didn't find a body, and he remembers telling his partner that there was something weird going on, like something doesn't feel quite right, so like it was circulating that there was fishy shit going on. Something smelled fishy and it wasn't the sushi shop across the street. In fact, it was so suspicious that he thought maybe this is just a joke, like nobody even fell. So he and his partner took their flashlight and just kept walking and kind of scaling it along the base of the cliff, thinking maybe she had kind of swerved over or something. Because if you fell, you'd probably be like right under where you fell. Like, right? Do physics not apply anymore? Some weird shit has been happening lately, so I wouldn't even be surprised. It took them a while. They kept looking around with their flashlights, not finding anything. Then after what seemed like ages of searching, their flashlight did finally come upon something white, which was was Jody's body against a very bloody tree. It kind of looked as though she had hit the tree and then slowly slid down it, so there was just a blood-covered tree that she had somehow smacked into until she eventually got to the base, and that's where she bled out. When they got closer to her, they noticed a really strong stench of alcohol, so they thought, okay, this makes sense because somehow there was alcohol involved. Like, it could be very plausible that she had too much to drink and just fell off. Steven, meanwhile, has no idea what the hell is going on. He's down at the station wondering why his wife isn't coming back with the police. Like, where is my wife? I just watched her fall off a cliff. Why isn't she here and fine? So he's just waiting and waiting there until all of the police that were on this little case came back and broke the news to him, which Steven then had to go tell their now 10-year-old son that his mother had just fallen off of a cliff of a place that they go to all the fucking time. That would be so heartbreaking and gut-wrenching to have that conversation and just experience that, which I think is what Steven mainly felt. He was just completely in denial that it happened. He was drinking himself absolutely bonkers. He remembers when he told his son Jonathan that they both just held each other and cried, but after that, it was dark times for Steven. Fortunately for the both of them, the sympathy really wasn't lacking. He had support from friends, from family, from pretty much anyone who had heard about this kind of freak accident. I mean, for fuck's sake, she left a child behind. So a lot of people were really concerned. Like, the love of his life just died on a cliff and he watched it. How could this happen to a place that they've gone so many times, like hundreds of times? Nobody knew how this could happen. In fact, investigators also wondered how it could happen, because almost from the start, the whole investigation team, like everyone who was involved, was getting weird vibes and gut feelings from everything going on. The rock climber Michael was losing sleep. He could not think about anything except why Jody's purse was just off the side of the edge, but there was no sign of her hitting it. Especially with where they found her, he thought either she should be on the ledge or the purse should be down with her. There was just way too much of a distance between her purse and where her body was. No matter how you really look at it, there isn't a way to piece that puzzle together. And whenever they're together, they just look at each other and are like, this doesn't feel right. Something is suspicious. Cheers. Why did her body land in kind of an upright position 40 feet from where her purse was? And they also found it kind of odd the way that Steven was acting. Like, he just upped his ass with the police officer and left, just so willingly. What the fuck is going on? If Bay were down at the bottom, you can bet your chap nipples that probably 99.9% of us would stay there. Oh my god, my fucking eyebrow is coming off now. Officer Siri, the gentleman who escorted Steven down, also got in on the suspicion train. I think that right when Siri picked Steven up, he didn't really know the whole story, so in the first portion of their meeting, he wasn't suspicious, but by the time they get down the mountain to the station, he remembers making a mental note that this guy is a fucking psychopath. Mainly because Steven just described himself basically witnessing a death, but he was so monotone. Like, there was no inflection or deflection. Is that what that is when you go up and down? It was as if he were reading the newspaper, like the sports section. I'm taking a drink. I don't know, you don't just watch your wife die and then sound like you're reading a script to a police officer of all people. He thought it was, what do you kids say these days? Soup sus. Super suspicious that the first thing Steven did when he got into the station was go to the drinking fountain, put some water in his eyes, and make it appear as though he had been crying. Could you not be a little bit more fucking obvious, sir? That is sloppy and suspicious, so we'll take 2 drinks for that. Nothing was connecting. Steven was just too nonchalant, and the few pieces of the puzzle that they were able to connect just didn't go in Steven's favor. But nobody could really prove anything, and it is a police officer's job to be extra suspicious. Really, nobody could prove that this wasn't just a simple accident. In fact, flash forward a few months ahead, the medical examiner actually ruled that Jody's cause of death could not be determined, meaning it was just as likely to be an accident as anything else. Super helpful, I know. But because really nothing could be determined, the case was closed. Imagine how the investigators felt, because they are trained to like have heightened senses when it comes to this stuff, and they know something is wrong, but they can't prove it, so there's this guy who possibly murdered his wife just walking around among us. Frustrating as fuck. My eyebrows might be a little bit different, but that's okay. Different is good. They're meant to be sisters, not twins. These are like cousins twice removed, and now they're just roommates. You know what? It happened. It's going to happen. We're gonna accept it. So life moves on for Steven. He tells everyone that this was just a freak accident. Nobody really has a reason not to believe him. The medical examiner didn't seem to disagree, so like, what is there to do except move the fuck on with your life? Really, the only people that were suspicious were the individuals directly involved with the case. Cue in Detective Lynham. Maybe it's Lynham. Lynham? Fuck, I don't know. Detective Lynham really recognized that there were a lot of open ends with this case. He felt as though maybe there was foul play involved, and he just had a feeling inside of him that this wasn't an accident, like, at all. He was reading every police report available and was kind of connecting the dots and sort of reading between the lines of what was reported. And the biggest red flag, like a red flag for a lot of people involved, was how chill he was right after he had witnessed his wife die. Like, had he acted like a normal person would have, there probably wouldn't have been any issue at all. Or at least they probably could have overlooked any of the other issues. But either way, you really didn't have to be psychic to recognize the body language that was going on. There, the look is done. Aren't I pretty? Well, now that time had kind of passed a little, there was stuff coming out of the woodworks. Were they as happy as they let on? No. Bunch of fakers. Well, police started really looking at physical evidence, written evidence. They even interviewed some of Jody's best friends and eventually found out that Jody and Steven actually weren't in love. Like, what a fucking rouge. This was so much of a rouge, in fact, they were in crisis mode. I guess the night at the Rocks wasn't supposed to be a nice little getaway. They had agreed to meet there to go over all of the marital issues that they were having. A date, says Steven? Date my ass. Even though I guess Steven brought like cheese and wine and crackers and everything to like schmooze somebody, they were actually gonna talk about the big D. Not his big D, but the D, divorce. Jody wanted a damn divorce and she was gonna get it. She was totally gonna go through with it. I think he was kind of hoping to woo her over and like win her back that night. But Jody was pretty much set in her ways. She had made a final decision. Things just weren't working out for her the way that she had hoped and the way that they had portrayed their relationship to everyone on the outside looking in. That just wasn't real. Investigators ended up questioning Hillary, who is Jody's bestest friend in the entire world. Like, Jody would tell her everything, and I mean everything. She sounds like she listens and she retains. She's not just sitting there on her phone playing Angry Birds. She is like here to be a shoulder to cry on, and that is exactly what Jody needed. And while Jody was crying on her best friend's shoulder, she let it be known that Jody was going to get a divorce, take their son, and just leave. Jody was convinced without a shadow of a doubt that Steven was cheating on her. She couldn't prove anything, but sometimes random ass women would just call the house. Sometimes they'd hang up on her. And in Jody's mind, she's like, oh, these stupid skanks are interested in my man. Like, maybe not 1000% sure, but the feeling is probably mutual between her husband and these women. Detectives learned that Jody actually already served him with papers. Like, she meant business. She was on top of this shit. She was over it. She was out of it. That was on September 8th of 1992. 2 weeks later, she died. Be suspicious. Drink. Ooh. I have this resting on my Cody Airspun and it picks up every time I pick this up. Okay, but this is actually kind of really nice and I am enjoying the shit out of myself. Thank you so much for being here. 2 days later, Lynham? We'll call him Lynham. No, maybe I like Lynham better. I like Lynham. 2 days after interviewing Hillary, Lynham was interviewing Steven again, who did confirm that yes, they were about to get a divorce. Or I guess maybe they were just talking about it, but this was actually something that they had been talking about for years. Like, this wasn't something new. This whole facade of them having a beautiful, happy little marriage, I guess, was kind of crumbling around them. There was a lot of mistrust, a lot of hurt feelings, and altogether their marriage was somewhat disorderly. But also, name me a marriage that isn't. But this was like extra fucked up. But when he confirmed the divorce, he also said that yeah, there actually were quite a few side chicks. Not just a couple either, which I'm not judging, but I guess they had like an open marriage, and since they started their open marriage, within a few years, he had been with 50 to 60 different women. So yeah, I guess you could say that he was cheating, but it really isn't because it's open. But was he with other women than Jody? Yes. Again, not here to judge, but homie was busy. And meanwhile, Jody was, at least according to Steven, perfectly okay with all of this. She was in on it. She was like, you have fun, babe, do your thing. That came directly from Steven. It does sound a little bit suspicious. Maybe she was okay with it, but either way, we need an excuse to take a drink. But after sleeping with 50 or 60 women, they both kind of stood back and said, maybe we should rekindle what we have and go back to being a monogamous couple. You know, let's recenter our chi and shit, just get grounded. And that, Steven says, is exactly why they went up on their little date to the Rock on the last night that Jody was alive. They wanted to work on their things, kiss and make up, hug it out. But the detectives, they were not buying any of this. They called bullshit like the moment he started talking. They thought, well, one, it's kind of a weird place to be romantic. Like, it is just a fucking rock in the middle of a park. But also, this is their spot, so really who cares where it is? It's romantic to them. But it also does seem a little bit suspicious because you can literally haul somebody up and throw their ass off the side. So it's like the perfect place to commit a crime. So like, how could you not be a little bit suspicious? And on that night, while Steven was down at the police station, they did search Steven's car. And what do you think they found? Some grapes, some crackers, some wine, some cheese, a blanket, and a hammer. Why does anybody need a fucking hammer on a picnic? Gonna smash some ants or something? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me either. But most importantly, it doesn't really make sense to the police officers. They thought, well, maybe if he wasn't successful throwing her off the cliff, or if he got cold feet, he could just hit her in the head and kind of bludgeon her with a hammer. That would be a fabulous plan B, thought the cops. Just makes sense. Whatever his plan was, we'll never know. He didn't end up using it, and there was no real DNA or anything on the hammer. I mean, it's just a fucking hammer. Nonetheless, they just wanted to cover every aspect of their ass, so they asked Steven, can we search your house? And he was like, yeah, I don't care. I'd be like, oh, hold on, give me 5 minutes to go clean up my sex swing and all that. But he was different. He was like, come on in. They combed the house, asked him about the hammer, which he said he was fixing a drawer. I don't know why the fuck he would have a hammer in his picnic shit if he's trying to fix his drawer at home. He just says his mind got a little boggled. He threw it in with the picnic shit and it ended up there. Drink to that. I don't think so, ma'am. So detectives are like at strike 100 with the red flags here, but I think more important shit was actually happening behind the scenes versus what they were going through. Because Steven, oh silly, silly Steven, he was talking to one of the local police officers, just chatting it up, you know, being a bro, not like smacking chests and talking football kind of bro, just like getting to know each other, or more so the officer getting to know him. Good officer. This gentleman officer was merely assigned to this only to be next to Steven and kind of question him, but more so to just check him out and make sure his body language doesn't change too much. They were chatting with each other, and once again, Steven is describing exactly what happened to this new officer. I'm sure at this point, like, chatter about this was already all over the police station, so he probably knew all of the details that he was being told. But midway between Steven telling this officer what happened, Steven stopped and said, "You don't believe me, do you?" To which the officer responded and said, "I believe an accident occurred. Was it an accident?" And at this point, Steven kind of just shuts down just a tiny bit. He puts his head down and very clearly says to the officer, "No." So the officer just very audibly heard Steven confess, saying that this accident wasn't an accident. Since they were the only two there, what else could it be? Could it be a murder? Don't be suspicious. Oh my god, I've had so much of this. If that is not the motherlode of all red flags, honey, I don't know what the fuck is. I'm positive they probably weren't recording that conversation. I don't think they had body cams like they do now. But because nothing was recording, the officer still wanted it fresh in his mind, so he rushed back to the other detectives and he recited exactly what just happened, and the officers just like brushed it off. The officers had just grilled him for hours upon hours and not gotten any kind of information like this out of him. He said nothing about this not being an accident, so they didn't re-interview him. I am not a police officer, I'm not a detective, I am nothing, but you would think that if a fellow officer clearly heard him say that he murdered his wife, they would drag Steven's ass directly back and question him. Like, would you not? That is just sloppy. So much sloppiness from everyone here, what the hell? But instead, with no physical evidence and the ruling of death being undetermined, this couldn't really be called a homicide. And everyone kind of moved on before, but now they really moved on. The detectives took on other cases, they kind of pushed this one to the back burner, and it pretty much fizzled out. The people who were suspicious really didn't have physical evidence to go on, so it was once again just ruled as an accident and left alone. So this time, 14 years go by. Steven ends up marrying Tina, but unlike last time, this truly did seem to be a match made in heaven. Like, any of the issues that he and Jody had were not present in this relationship. This relationship felt as good as his and Jody's looked. Tina said that Steven was the ideal husband. They were like two puzzle pieces for each other that just seemed to fit. Tina had really no complaints. She didn't really talk to Steven about what had happened before. She just knew that it was an accident. But even with Steven's new life, and even though he and Tina didn't really discuss his past, he never forgot about Jody. Like, how could you? They had a fucking child together and he watched her die. You know, forget that shit. In fact, several people didn't forget about Jody, including the new prosecutor. This prosecutor was really trying to raise the numbers, trying to solve old cases. And so he brought back one that had totally fucking fizzled out, the Jody Schaefer case. Oh my gosh, this is taking me so long that I need a fucking pee break. hold on. Ooh, this look though, how you doing? Fuck, I look like a bird, but a sassy bird. By 2002, there was nothing left to the case. It was completely gone. And this prosecutor was really what this case needed. It needed a hardcore push because on one hand, it didn't have solid evidence for it even to be reopened in the first place. It had literally nothing new, but now what it did have was a famous name. By now, Dr. Bodden, a world-renowned forensic pathologist, had joined board. He's famous if you've ever seen HBO's Autopsy. He's the investigator on that show. Like, he's testified in the O.J. Simpson case. He's investigated the Kennedy and the King assassinations, as well as Jeffrey Epstein, John Belushi, and even George Floyd. So, like, this guy has done some shit. He is the real deal, and, like, he knows what he's talking about. And the prosecutor was hoping that he would come to bring the heat, and oh my god, he burned everyone. He's like a fucking dragon. Looking at all of the old evidence, Dr. Bodden determined that without a doubt in his mind, this could not have been an accident. There is no way. Talk about a mic drop, like, boom moment. So in December of 2008, detectives once again paid a visit to Stephen's residence. He was thoroughly confused. He could not figure out why the hell these officers are at my door bugging me. Like, could it have been the possible murder case that I was involved in? Probably not. As far as he knew, his name was perfectly clear. He wasn't a suspect or anything. He was just trying to live his best life with his new wife. But now with this realization that there really isn't any way this could have been an accident, police took Stephen into custody. I do want to say that I've seen footage of Stephen talking, and when he speaks, he does seem very sincere and genuine when he speaks about this being an accident. Like, he had tears in his eyes, and he appeared distraught years after the incident. So it's just really difficult to know exactly what to believe here. But, like, how many times have we seen somebody kill a loved one or just anyone in general and then act like they're remorseful? So yeah, I really don't know. Eventually though, trials do start for the alleged murder, but with every case, time is one of the most important and crucial, if not the most important players. And when you do have cases that go cold for a little bit, they can be a little bit tough to reheat on both sides. Like, memories fade or change, witnesses are lost, people die. But then again, time can give the people involved a chance to grow, to kind of look at things in a completely new perspective, which is exactly what happened with this case. Stephen Sharp was now being accused of something he had done almost 20 years ago. And during this trial, the prosecutor promised to tell the jury a story that was just as simple as it was brutal. Stephen didn't want to pay for an expensive, costly divorce, so he lured his loving wife to the edge of this cliff that everyone knows they loved, and he pushed her or threw her the fuck over. That just has to be how it happened. And the prosecutors brought up the fact that there was virtually no DNA or any kind of evidence along the rock wall that signaled anything towards an accidental tumble, not to mention how fucking cool and calm Stephen was the entire night. He was chilling like a villain, and the officers who took the stand kept reiterating how peculiar it was that he had just witnessed his wife die, but he was still so calm. Much too calm. Like Officer Siri, when he was in the car, he played back word for word from his memory exactly what Stephen was saying, and the way he said it sounded like they were exchanging basketball scores or like sewing tips. I don't know what the fuck straight guys talk about. Boobs or something? I don't know. And a very important person to take the stand was the officer who was standing there with Stephen. The officer who witnessed Stephen put his head down and say that this wasn't an accident. But what that officer said was already kind of known, like that was public knowledge. The real juice here, like the girth of this story, comes from the family and the friends that took the stand. Dr. Bowden himself, remember him, the famous pathologist? He marched his ass up to the stand and testified. And he said with all of his knowledge and experience that's behind him, he believes this case was no accident, it was 1000% a homicide. Like, you have this infamous pathologist going against you, like there is no way anything is gonna go in your favor after this. He went on to say that if you accidentally fall from a cliff, you'll be within feet of where you fell from the base. Like, not directly right there because you might hit a cliff or a tree or something along the way, but still it's gonna be in like that vicinity. But that didn't happen with Jody. Her body was 40 or 50 feet away from where it should have been. Suspicious! It's basically just ice now. But not only was she like 40 or 50 feet out from the base, she was also 30 feet north of where she should have been. Like, this is a large space to span. She had to have been like picked up and forcefully thrown to land where she landed. So to agree, Dr. Marianne Clayton, who is the original medical examiner and determined that Jody's death was undetermined, when she was on trial, she said that the head and neck and just overall body injuries weren't really consistent with falling down a cliff. Once again, I'm not in this field, field. I'm not a forensic person, but I could have fucking told you that. I would probably say that could have been deduced like a long time ago, but she did say that given the technology that they had, this was the best conclusion at the time that she could have come up with. I mean, nothing against her, but that's a little bit scary. And now the time had passed and she was able to kind of re-examine the files and look at all the injury pictures and all that good shit. She thought, you know, maybe if you fell down like 100-foot cliff, you would have maybe a broken bone or two, I don't know, a cut, some scrapes, just anything, but Jody didn't. So that makes you wonder, why in the hell would Steven kill Jody? Maybe because he didn't want to go through the divorce? Maybe he didn't want a custody battle? Maybe he didn't want to split his assets? Like, divorces can be very, very messy. So, like, I don't get him killing somebody, like, fuck that, but I do understand him not wanting to go through with the divorce and just wanting to work things out, but I also understand that sometimes you can't. You give it all you got, kid. You do what you gotta do. Is that maybe without the murder? But prosecutors also found another major reason for Steven to kill his wife, the possible payout. Get this, not but a few months before Jody's death, Steven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy payable only to a primary beneficiary, which was Steven. If they got the divorce that Jody was pushing, the $500,000 payout might not happen. Don't take my money, not the money, not the gumdrop button. But to Steven, she was worth more dead to him than she was alive. Like, what a creepy thought. Needless to say, things really weren't going that great for Steven in court. After hearing everything that the prosecution said, it just seemed very bleak. When Jody was alive, she actually confided in her best friend, saying that Steven would become violent with her, especially after the news of the divorce, and she was just determined to get the fuck away from him. And when she did end up serving him, she was scared shitless. But like, just because you're scared of somebody doesn't mean that they're gonna kill you, right? I would hope. And for the most part, I feel like that's what mostly everybody assumed. That is until Jonathan took the stand against his father. Jonathan was now in his late 20s. He was a businessman, but was claiming that his father was just like desperately raging and violent, just an angry, brutal man who would really just abuse the shit out of his mother. And Jonathan said Steven would throw hot coffee at her, would beat her with his fist while he was driving, and Jonathan would be in the back seat just begging his dad to stop. These were super serious, case-altering allegations that he was bringing to the court. And it's not like he wasn't credible, like he was a grown-ass man now, so like people were listening. But Jonathan also remembered the last day that his mom was alive. He remembered her saying that she didn't want to go with Steven, at least not alone. In fact, she told Steven, if I wanted to go with you, I wouldn't fucking be divorcing you, right? But for Jonathan, even with all of the abuse that he witnessed and went through, it didn't really click in his mind that his dad was the murderer until 2008. He was able to see all of the evidence and hear everything, and it just like clicked, like, oh. But again, where was the proof that Jody killed his wife? The hammer in the bag? It didn't have DNA. I suppose that could be something, but what was way more damning than that was the other eyewitness, the woman that Steven was sleeping with. Or one of them at least. Terry Schofield, a very innocent, sweet-seeming woman, was just smitten with Steven. There really is no other way to put it. She was just Twitter-pated. They'd been together for a few months. She even told a gal pal of hers that he was the best thing to ever happen to her. Like, she was just head over heels. Just so perfect. To her knowledge, there was absolutely nothing amiss. Like, how could it ever be better? Well, ma'am, we mustn't blame sweet, innocent Miss Schofield, because Steven actually lied to her while they were sleeping together, saying that he was never married, he doesn't have a wife, you're my only boo. They always say that. Meanwhile, their dick's wetting some other person while they're texting you that. We digress. He lied. She didn't know there was anything amiss. She didn't know that he was divorced, but he did say that he had a lot of stress, like a lot of things on his mind. He was going through some things. She didn't really know what. And their relationship was kind of on the short side, like it was only a few months, so they couldn't get super attached. But one of the key things that she very clearly remembers him saying was on Labor Day when they were walking the beach. She remembers him saying that by the end of September, all of his stress would just be gone. That's it, just be gone. She didn't really think much into it at that time. She was like, okay, well, maybe he's got like a meeting or something that he's gonna have. She was just still in the infatuation stage. She was in bliss. She was just overlooking all of the red flags. She was not fazed at all until all the court shit started happening. Then, like for so many people, I think shit just started clicking. All the little puzzle pieces that were once missing aren't as missing anymore. Things are just becoming a little bit more clear. It's like when you finally put your contacts in. conversation. You look in the mirror and you're like, what the fuck? When did I gain those 20 pounds? And then you take them back out and you're basically Terry. Unbeknownst to Terry, 2 weeks after that conversation, Jody was dead. So he's already been dishonest about being married, and now we know about his stress being mysteriously gone. Like, things aren't looking good. But the witness that was really the clincher of the sphincter here was Jody's best friend. Remember her? She sounds like a peach. Jody told her best friend that if anything were to happen to her because of this divorce, look directly at Steven. And look, something happened right around the time of her divorce. So who the fuck are we looking at? The last person with her. Everything was against Steven, and it was very clear and very strong. The angry and abusive husband facing marital issues, the loss of a possible insurance policy, possibly losing his son, possibly losing half of everything, and just living multiple lives with women that he was lying to. Like, it didn't look good. But of course, if there's evidence for a conviction, there's probably evidence against it. Tina, the current wife, just believes all up and down that he simply could not do it. This gentleman is so sweet. He has such a kind heart. He is such a sweet soul. She basically gives the he's innocent shakedown. He's just too precious and wouldn't even hurt a damn dung beetle. But people don't know if her little dung beetle bit is true or if she's just talking shit. But anything she had to say really wasn't that effective in anything, so her shit just got pushed to the side. So the defense began by reminding the jury that after all of these years, we still only have the same evidence. The same evidence which shows him not guilty. Like, they couldn't prove he was a killer in 1992. How the fuck are they supposed to now? And one of the huge defenses here was sloppy police work. The body was never photographed before being moved. Like, I'm sorry, I've seen Dexter. You were supposed to photograph every inch of a crime scene. I thought, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But the police basically destroyed every part of the crime scene. They were moving shit, they were walking all over stuff, they were touching things. It could have been because they didn't think that it was a murder case, so they weren't planning on it going any farther. But there were also so many people at the lookout at that time, just onlookers, people enjoying the scenery. Where were all those people? Apparently, rather than being questioned, the police officers just sent everybody home. Who knows what anybody saw? Like, for all we know, somebody could have seen him push her over the edge. Sloppy, sloppy. Just a sloppy Joe up in here. But even way back when this did originally happen, the police were suspicious about him, but why didn't they record any of the interviews? There is no evidence that he was even taken in. Other than shit that's written down, like, nobody took any documents of his statement. Nobody saw how monotone he was speaking, how he was acting. They're just going based off of he said, she said. And the jury just needs something physical to go off of. So when the police were questioned as to why didn't you record or do like an audio recording or something of Steven, their answer, I don't know. It just does not make sense to me. Like that, I don't get it. And the hammer that was in the picnic bag, we basically threw that away. There was no evidence saying that he was going to beat her with it. It was just hearsay. Just like Dr. Bodden came to testify against Steven, Steven had a little card up his sleeve. And that is Dr. Cyril Wacht. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Anyways, they have well over 14,000 cases that they've been involved in. Or I should say they've done over 14,000 autopsies. They've testified in over 1,000 cases. Some of them include JFK, Sharon Tate, Kurt Cobain's, Elvis Presley. The list goes on. Like, he is a big deal too. He's probably equally as powerful as Dr. Bodden, but he just took a completely different take, which was that Jody died an accidental death. Bless him. He used a large monitor as well as a big stuffed teddy bear to kind of demonstrate to the jurors what could have happened. And what was super fucking important with this case was the angle of the rocks. She could have totally fell down the side, and the rocks that were like that, she could have fallen down and kind of catapulted out from the angular rocks and ended up in the tree. That, to me, just, I don't know. Like, I picture that on Wile E. Coyote, but I don't know if I believe that that could really happen. Could it? Maybe it could. Fuck, I don't know. But that really does explain why her body was found so far away, why it landed in a tree. It does kind of make sense. Oh my God. Fuck me up. My ColourPop liner just broke. But that really wasn't the only thing against the prosecution claim. Remember that $500,000 payout? I do. Who the hell could forget that? Well, apparently Steven did, because it took him years to claim that bitch. But also, if any eyes are on him and he's smart, he would wait. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because otherwise, like, if you instantly take it out, then of course you're like a sitting duck. That's why you did it. And the other motive, their divorce case, they were talking about divorce for years. Steven Steven even mentioned that to the police. To him, the divorce papers were just another thing that they had to go through. It wasn't as big of a deal as people were making it. People were just painting Steven as a crazy, abusive, angry person because of the divorce. But whether or not he truly was pissed off about the divorce, I don't freaking know, because nobody really said that he genuinely was, at least nobody credible. Everyone just assumed that, oh, my man's getting a divorce, he's gonna pop off, like, yeah, he's gonna kill his wife. That was just an assumption among people. It was never proven. Other than what Helen said she allegedly heard, there really wasn't any proof. And who knows, like, Helen could just be bitter that her friend is dead. And I don't really have any reason not to believe Helen. Like, she seems like a pretty trustworthy person. I don't know why she would lie. She's probably a credible source. People just kept coming forward saying he was abusive, and he would defend himself saying, no, I'm a nice person, like, I am a human being. He wasn't abusive like people said, and he wasn't really that angry about the divorce, but he certainly didn't want it. He was merely trying to resalvage the pieces of his marriage, which is why they went on the date to the Rock in the first place. In the statement that Steven's girlfriend made, where she said that he would be stress-free about everything by the end of September, Steven later said that he would frequently use that line on all of his girlfriends, and it was just a clumsy way to break up with them. I don't get that. Like, how does that lead to a breakup? Did he mean that he was gonna break up with poor, sweet, innocent Terry at the end of the month? I don't know. That just doesn't, like, connect. I think partway into having 50 or 60 different girlfriends, you'd figure out how to break up with them smoothly. But Steven also talked about all of the girls that were allegedly calling. He just flat out said that they weren't. And if they were, they didn't bug Jody because she, too, had gentleman suitors. Ooh, we're getting deeper. The cucumbers are turning into pickles now. Jody filled out this dating service with everything that she wanted in a man. So, like, it was very clear that they both weren't in this marriage, or at least it was actually an open marriage, like he said. But I think out of all of the information and everything that was found, both good and bad, the thing that took the biggest toll on Steven was when his son took the stand. Like, that is a big ouch right there. Just Jonathan painting his father as like an abusive brute, a cold-blooded killer. It made Steven sick to his stomach because he swore that he never touched or hurt Jonathan. In fact, when you look at the police report just a few years earlier, Jonathan had nothing but kind things to say about his dad. He never mentioned any kind of abuse or hitting him. He was like, my dad is actually a really good guy. Like, Father of the Year award goes to him. I got him a mug. Like, he is just stellar. And so why is it now that suddenly Jonathan is like changing his mind? It doesn't make sense. Or does it? Because on the witness stand, Jonathan actually admitted that he lied to the police several times, which just takes his credibility like down to zero. And then once he found out that his dad was arrested, his story changed completely, because who do you think would then get the money if his dad was arrested? Jonathan. Okay, my camera battery died, so I kind of got a lot of the look out of the way here. Where did we leave off? I think his son was being a little bit shady. Outside of the court, when asked if Steven did it, he was so passionate. He said no, up and down, he did not. But still, he wouldn't take the stand and testify in court. But to this day, he still says that everything that he originally told the cops is completely true. They were just gonna go out, go to the club, have a good fun night, and he really wishes that they didn't take the detour to go to their favorite place, that they'd just gone out instead. Everything would have been completely different. Although, maybe his hammer would have been dirty, so who knows? But even though he didn't take the stand, he still professed his innocence. But did the jury feel that way? It seemed as though they were pretty split in half. Like, some of the jurors thought the evidence was over-fucking-whelming. Others thought there really wasn't enough to stand on. The things that the jury really ended up looking at was Jody intoxicated during all of this when it happened? Yes. So why did Steven let her that close to the edge? Like, she was right up close while sitting in front of him. It took the jury just 3 days for everyone to come to a conclusion, and I think what really solidified everyone's choices was Jody's best friend saying that if anything happened to Jody, look to Steven. Like, the words literally came from Jody's mouth, allegedly, I guess. But I guess that wasn't technically enough to fully go off of what really nailed that nail into the coffin was Terry's statement about being stress-free by the end of the month. It painted the jury a perfect mental image of an execution, not an accident. accident. But to this day, Steven still believes that the jury was kind of out to get him, like they did have a little bit of a bias towards him. He thought that maybe his open marriage was a lack of morals and they were judging him based on that. So I would hope that they'd base less off of that and more off any other evidence that they could have, especially when she was on a dating site, so there's like evidence that they did have an open marriage. But in all honesty, the amount of evidence for any kind of judging really is very, very minimal. In the end, Steven was given life in prison, and in 2014, an appeals court overturned his guilty verdict. Then 2 years later, the Supreme Court reversed that decision, and now he's carrying out his life sentence in jail. I don't know if maybe they're going to be reopening this case, but it seems like a lot of the research either swings one way, like he either did it or he didn't. It's just hard to know. This is a tough one, especially because there have been a few accidents at the Palisades, so this is either like the perfect cover-up or it genuinely was a terrible accident. All right, so our story starts on a terrible day, September 11th, 2001. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the 5th grade. We had the TVs on. It was just so bad. While New York and everyone with a television or a radio was dealing with the tragic shit that was going on and just the awfulness of what was happening, the stars of today's story, we'll call them, I don't know, the throuple. They really weren't a throuple, but we'll just say they were. They were driving up in Northern California, specifically in Yosemite Park. Scenery was breathtaking. I don't know if you've ever been there, but oh my god, they have beautiful waterfalls. They've got huge trees. Unfortunately, our little throuple who was driving weren't taking in any of the sights. They had other shit on their mind. And honestly, I think one of the throuple was so fucking sleepy that they couldn't even stay awake, but that's getting ahead of myself. Let's start a little bit ahead of this. We can rewind to who it was that was kind of a little bit sleepy. That would be the gentleman in this throuple, Larry. You get it, Larry. Larry McNabney, he was a tall, handsome, good-looking attorney from Nevada. He was well respected. He had a very well-endowed bank account. What'd you think I was gonna say? He really did well, and he thought that life was to be grabbed by the cojones. Like, if there was an adventure, he was on top of it, or any kind of party, or just something that made you feel alive. He loved expensive jewelry, extravagant trips, high-priced champagne. He was basically living like Beyonce. But he also loved to be in control. It was almost to the point where it was a little bit obsessive, like very type A. There was never any dust on his desk, never a hair out of place. His pen was always like perfectly aligned. He just believed in being very organized, and that's one of the things that his daughter Octavia loved about him, especially when he would come to the courtroom. He had a way of commanding the room like no other. It was almost like a stage for him, and he was performing, and he would just have the audience captivated. He was so good. And damn it, he made sure people knew it. He had billboards, he had commercials. He would easily take on 50 clients a month, like no problem, and that is how he became so successful. Just a lot of hard work, and it really did pay off. Like, he lived an extravagant life, and he lived that life. But as they say, money doesn't always make you happy, or at least that's what I've heard. I can't confirm. Might not make you happy, but it sure does solve some problems. As happy as Larry seemed, nobody's perfect. He still had a lot of demons. He had a very troubled childhood, which I think ultimately shaped who he was as a man. He struggled a lot with alcohol. He went through a lot of divorces, had issues with women. It's like he had a missing void inside of him that he was trying to fill with all this partying and drugs and drinking, and he just could not fill it. Giggity. In fact, his friends were often very, very worried about him because he'd go on benders and just get totally trashed, and they wouldn't hear from him for days, sometimes weeks. He's one of those kind of friends where you kind of like worry about them, but you're also a little bit jealous because they are having the best fucking life ever. The kind where they just never know where they're gonna wake up. That would take its toll very, very quickly. And that was his life for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. I guess these benders would be so frequent that even his best friend made him a t-shirt that says, "Where's Larry McNabney today?" So though they were worried, I think they were still trying to have fun with it because this is obviously his lifestyle that he chose. Eventually, he would just come back from his bender, things would go back to normal, and it would be like it didn't even happen. But one day, after years of doing this, something snapped inside of him, and he was like, I need to settle down, like get my shit together, maybe take it easy for a while. He just wanted to live a straight line for a little while, so what does he do? He ups and moves to Vegas, the capital of getting your shit together. I do love Vegas, though. He thought, Vegas is really the place I want to be, but why this sudden change of heart for him? Well, the reason came in the form of a tall, beautiful woman, of course. And what a cool drink of water she was. Miss Elisa was a tan, gorgeous, dark-haired, vivacious woman, 17 years younger than Larry. She was fun, she was energetic, and she was just breathing new life into Larry that he hadn't felt for years, a life that really made him not want to party anymore and finally get his feet onto the ground that he wanted to walk on. And Octavia, Larry's daughter, was so welcoming. She wanted nothing more than her dad to find happiness, and it seemed like he did. So Octavia just welcomed her in with open arms. She's like, come here, sweetie, give me love. Life just seemed extraordinarily fabulous for this new duo. Larry and Elisa really thrived, both professionally and personally, and business was booming. In fact, they ended up expanding to Sacramento, California, which is actually where they end up moving. They buy a house together, they get married, all that good shit, and then she eventually became Larry's office manager. And she was fan-freaking-tastic at her job. Like, the pair of them together, it was like unbeatable. So they expanded even farther, and when you expand, it usually means you need more help too, so they were hiring. In walks a beautiful, bright, and vivacious young college student. I think she was 20 or 21. Her name was Sarah Dutra. Now, Miss Sarah, she was very, very headstrong, had great recommendations. She told Larry and Elisa that she was a very hard worker. She was from parents who were devout Christians. She just came from a good family. She had a good head on her shoulders, so they said, you know what? Fuck it. You're hired. She joins the team, hauls ass, and eventually works her way up to become the same level that Elisa is of office manager. And that's when Elisa started to notice that she and Sarah had really similar likes. In fact, they all kind of had similar likes. They were all really attracted to the glitzy high life. They liked horses, and they even went out and bought matching Vipers. I'm sorry, but nary a time has my boss ever asked if I want to go out and buy a Viper with them. Maybe I just didn't work the right job. I don't know. Like, hi, room for one more? Sign me the fuck up, daddy. I don't know who the fuck bought the Viper, but it's not like Larry couldn't afford it. His business was doing very, very well thanks to the help of Elisa and Sarah. Like, they were kicking ass. And because business was doing so well, he was kind of able to step back a little bit, pick up some hobbies, and I guess maybe take in some horse shows. I guess they all loved like showing horses or something. I don't really know much about horses, but they liked horses. They were doing such a good job at managing his business that he just felt like he didn't have to show up anymore, and he slipped into his partying ways, like his very old habits. It's almost like his appetite for adventure was so sporadic and extreme that when he wanted to take a bite, he took a big fucking bite. Like, no nibbles over here. He just wants the whole damn cake. He just could not live without a little bite of adventure. And even though they'd been married for 7 years, there must have been other benders during their relationship, because he went on one and nobody seemed to bat an eyelash. His friends and family were like, oh, he's just being him again, not gonna think into it. However, on this bender in particular, the days started turning into weeks, and it was just starting to feel a little bit off with the people close to him. They weren't like super worried, but enough to know that something might not be right, but I can't really tell. So nobody really read into it. A little bit before this bender, Ginger Miller was hired at the firm. Both Elisa and Sarah were doing the managing and kind of keeping things afloat while he was gone, and they weren't certain what to tell people about his disappearance. It's not exactly the most professional thing. Ginger, who was hired as a secretary, was told to tell friends and family different things about where he was, like he was taking a skiing trip or golfing, or he was just somewhere where they couldn't get a hold of him, like on a plane, some kind of bullshit. If it was a client, she was told to tell them that he was busy working on their deposition or with another client. There was just a lot of shady, sketchy shit happening. Well, Larry's family starts to get a few whiffs of the bullshit that's happening, because he missed Halloween, which was fine. He missed Thanksgiving, which, okay, but then Christmas, he didn't show up. The family was like, he is always here for Christmas. What the fuck is happening? This behavior was just very contrary to Larry. In fact, Octavia, his daughter, began to wonder, like, did something go wrong? Because he does work with a lot of clients, and he does win a lot of cases, and if you win a case, that means you also might make an enemy on the other side. So did he get involved with something that maybe he shouldn't have? She didn't know. And Octavia was lucky enough to have a friend in law enforcement, so she gave them a ring. And he told Octavia there could be two different scenarios here. One, if he's in hiding, he's gonna be pissed that you found him because he's supposed to be hiding. And two, something did actually happen to him and he's in danger. Not really the most helpful advice, but you take what you can get. I don't think either of those situations really sat well in Octavia's mind, and she wasn't the only one to be suspicious. Back at the office, Ginger was beginning to hear things from coworkers, from clients, and excuses still being made on his behalf. Very suspicious, so cheers, suspicion. The way the office was going in his disappearance, it was not a cute look, so Ginger ends up, oh my god, oh, that made me salivate. Ginger just was not sure what to do, so she ended up writing a note and slipping it underneath the police officer's door. Obviously, detectives got the note, which raised all sorts of red red flags. So who is the first person that they always look at? The spouse. They go to the office to find Elisa, and where the fuck did she go? I don't know, she's not here. Now, not only is Larry missing, but both Larry and Elisa are missing. Larry was gone for 5 months, almost half a year, and nobody thought to take any action until Ginger. Everyone seems to be fucking missing now. The office is completely abandoned. They were like, okay, well, let's start questioning employees. Let's start with Sarah, because she seems to be pretty high up here. So they ask young Sarah to come in. She says, fine, yeah, no problem. She brings in her little tiny lap dog for comfort. Bless her. I would probably bring Ron in too if I were being questioned. Wouldn't I, Ron? Where is Ron? But she said that she and Elisa had become very, very close over the last few months, and she had witnessed Elisa becoming kind of erratic in his absence. Like when he left, Sarah just says she kind of went a little bit bonkers, broke down. Sarah pretty much confirmed exactly what Ginger told the police, that they were directed to give excuses for Larry, and Elisa was now really running the business. She would have to write checks in his name for 20, 30K. Like a lot of fucking money, but all with his signature. And Sarah figured that with all of these big ass checks that Elisa is writing, Elisa must just be trying to keep the business afloat. She didn't think anything was suspicious at all. Well, honey, I'll drink to that. But Sarah did keep emphasizing and saying there really isn't anything suspicious, and with Larry now gone, missing, who knows where the fuck he is, Elisa's just trying to live her life. So Elisa actually invited Sarah out to a horse event. She's like, well, if my husband's not here, I might as well still have fun. Elisa said she bought Sarah's ticket, like she was good to come the next day, but she told the officers, when I got to the airport, I was very confused because in fact the ticket wasn't purchased for me. And then when she tried to call Elisa, this came on.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
Okay. And I guess that's that. That's the last time she heard from Elisa. What a weird way to end shit, right? So at this point, she's telling Ginger, like, who am I employed by? I need to start looking for a new job. The boss is gone. The other manager's gone. Like, what a shit spread on a cracker. So the police were like, you're obviously a sweet girl. We don't need to question you anymore. You're good to go. But now, by this time, this case was actually getting quite a bit of attention. Thomas Testa, which I kept saying Thomas Testy for the longest time. It's not, it's Testa. Anyways, Thomas was the San Juan Keen prosecutor. He handled many a missing case, and he was very intrigued by Larry and Elisa's case. A successful attorney with an ungodly large caseload just does not up and disappear randomly. No matter what his friends tell the police about there being benders, it just is weird. This isn't like a vagabond who just up and leaves to Montana or Maine or wherever the fuck people go. This was kind of a high-profile gentleman that can't really afford to up and leave for half a year at a time. I mean, he could afford it, but like his business can't. But it does kind of amaze me that his friends were so used to him being gone for months at a time that they didn't think much into this. Like, what a life. But Thomas was just not buying it, so he started going down the list of suspects, starting the digging with Elisa. Thomas described her as a star out of like a film noir, just a classic beauty, and she was charming, she was powerful, she knew how to wrap a man around her pinky. Like, she would say jump and they'd say into which ocean. She was that good. Or is that a good thing? I don't know. I guess maybe it's a talent. Well, what we thought we knew about Elisa was apparently all wrong. Larry's best friend, Fred, who made Larry the t-shirt, like they were really close, he would say that Elisa was so fucking controlling, he wouldn't even be allowed to see friends, see family. She had literally taken over his life, from his practice to his relationships, in just a really negative way. It kind of seemed like she was bringing down his vibes quite a lot. And poor Octavia, Larry's daughter, was so close with her dad. And after Elisa cut her from her dad's life, she was just devastated. Like, why did this need to happen? What did Elisa have to hide that she didn't want any friends and family knowing what she was up to? Whatever she was doing, it was becoming evident that she was being very, very suspicious. In fact, at several points, Fred received calls from Larry, and Larry would say, she is so controlling, like, I don't even know who exactly I married. And Larry's like, you've been married so many times, you never really get a chance to know who somebody actually is. And Larry was like, no, this is completely different. Like, I actually don't know her. In fact, I'm not even certain if Elisa is really her name. Oh, and this is after 7 years. Could you imagine being married to somebody for 7 years and finding out that who you thought they were isn't who they are? That just is a mind fuck. I do remember learning that my grandma's name wasn't actually grandma, and that was a mind fuck, but this is a whole different level. Larry also told Fred that Elisa would kind of pickpocket him in his own house and take his wallet and steal steal anything that was in it. Like, in his own house, he would have his wallet in his pocket and it wouldn't be there anymore. He couldn't leave it on a nightstand or on a table because he knew if he did, it would be empty by the time he got it. That is shitty and really breaks the trust, but that's not even all of it. He also found that almost $100,000 was missing from his practice, just like up and gone, and he knew that she was the culprit. Larry would just vent and vent to Fred, and Fred would be like, why the fuck are you still with this psychopath? And Larry would just respond and say, there's something about her that I can't not love. Like, she has some kind of a hold on me. And Fred was like, okay, well that hoo-ha must be fire, because I don't know what the fuck you mean about that, Larry. I mean, Larry wasn't new to divorce. He'd gone through it several times, but there was just something different about Elisa, and he didn't want a divorce for them. And Octavia even mentioned that it did seem as though Elisa had some kind of chain or hold on him. It was just unnatural. But Larry's suspicions about his wife that he confided in Fred turned out to be true. In fact, the woman that he thought he married was not the true woman that he married. She had a completely different life that he had no clue about. She had a past that included arrests for stolen property. She had credit card fraud and grand theft. She was basically a professional man-wooer and would use her abilities to con them. She was actually amazing at it. But was that all she was doing with Larry, just stringing him along for 7 fucking years just for what, $100,000? That does sound a little bit excessive, which even Fred agreed. Even though she is a professional con artist, that just doesn't make sense. Like, get the money and run, girl. Well, one sunny day in California, this missing persons case changed completely and got way more bizarre. A farm worker saw a huge ass flock of vultures circling this one spot in the vineyard, and then when they got closer, they saw something was sticking out of the ground. Never a good sign. The worker said, I don't know what this is. They called the police. Investigators made their way out, and the investigators thought this is probably just another dead animal, like it happens all the fucking time here. It's super common. It's a flat terrain. These vultures can see for fucking miles, so they probably have their eye on like a dead rat or something. So they come up and they see, no, this is not a rat or a possum or anything. This is a human leg just sticking right out of the ground. And the body attached must have been in very poor condition. I mean, this is out in the middle of the desert. It is hot. But I guess the body was so badly decomposed that the medical examiner had to use dental records to identify the body. Yeesh. And poor Olivia, oh my god, my heart just fucking breaks because they had to call her and she just said she broke the fuck down. She fell on the floor. She was shaking. She never swears, but she remembers just screaming in the phone like, fuck, just throwing the phone across the room. She said in her whole life she's never felt as much anguish as when she felt right then. And even when you watch interviews like 10, 15 years after this has happened, it is still really difficult to watch. Like, it chokes her the fuck up. I could imagine just being so close with your father, being daddy's little girl, and the last time that you saw him was months and months ago, and that was the last time that you're ever gonna see him again. I can't even fathom how that feels. But now with her dad's case going from missing to now murder, it was a completely different approach. Like, police now really were on top of their shit and they were starting an investigation hardcore. And people didn't really understand this case. Like, who would just take this man, kill him, leave him to rot in a vineyard? It didn't make sense. There were no signs of a stab wound, no foul play. And the medical examiner found something quite unusual. Can you guess what his cause of death was? Horse tranquilizer. Horse tranquilizer. That's interesting. Who else likes horses? His wife? Sarah? I don't know, but even odder was the fact that he had been dead for quite a while before being put in the vineyard. Like, the body's decomposition rate didn't match his time of death, meaning Larry was preserved. And investigators thought, who the fuck has like a fridge or a freezer big enough to discreetly store this body in? You don't just walk into Arby's and be like, hey, can I store this in your walk-in freezer? Isn't that wild though that they can figure that out? Wow, science. People wanted answers though, especially Olivia, who is now waking up to hearing her father's voice calling her in her sleep. She was just waking up to the sound of him screaming her name, calling for help. And she was getting like a weird feeling. She kept thinking Elisa had something to do with it. Maybe she didn't work alone, but she is somehow involved. And police, in fact, still had their radar on Elisa. Even more so now that he was dead. Like, she's their prime suspect. But she's also still missing. How convenient. And it turns out she actually wasn't wasn't that difficult to track down. Police ended up finding the gorgeous woman who men seem to be voluntarily enslaved by in, of all places, the Sunshine State, Florida. By now she had a short haircut, a new name, and it's not like she was stupid. She had an IQ of, I think, 140. Like, she was a smart toaster strudel. And she was able to start a brand new life down there as a paralegal as if nothing had happened. Which, it kind of sounds like something she's done before. Police took her into custody. She broke down. She said her real name is Lauren, not Lauren, but Lauren Renee Sims. She's from Massachusetts. She's a mother of 2, and she was wanted in Florida for burglary and theft charges, so she fled. She's just been on the run for 9 fucking years. Damn, that's a long time. While on the run, she made her way to Vegas, which is where she met Larry, and then once she found out she'd be questioned about Larry, she fled. She fled again, now going from state to state. Like, she was a full-time fugitive. Wonder if there's an insurance option for that. And when she was taken in, police didn't even have to ask her. She just started talking like she had to get this off of her chesticles, and this is what she said.
Did I kill my husband? Yes, I killed my husband.
Isn't that crazy though? Like, no remorse or anything, just like stone cold. It's like she was talking about unloading groceries from her car or something. But my friends, that was just the top layer of the frosting on this story. There's a whole cake of cover-ups and fuckery here. In fact, I guess killing Larry wasn't even Elisa's or Lauren or whatever the fuck her name is. It wasn't her idea. Whose idea was it, you ask? Turns out they already cleared her name. Remember Miss Sarah coming in with her little lapdog? Sarah, who claimed they were all such good friends, but she had no idea about any of this. Well, Elisa was now blaming her. There is no way that she herself could ever do something like this. No, ma'am, it was all Sarah. Elisa said that Larry had been a very heavy drinker, which was kind of common knowledge, like that's believable, but he was also really abusive. And Sarah came to Elisa and said, there is a way out of this. We could kill him. So with every just gruesome and horrific detail, Elisa starts telling police what happened. There was a horse show in, I thought it was Arizona, but it was Los Angeles. But Larry and Elisa drove to this horse show and Sarah was gonna fly out the next day and meet them there. But Elisa said Sarah flew out more to hang out with her. I guess Larry didn't love her so much. Allegedly, he didn't care for her, I don't know. But the day Sarah arrived that very day, she told Elisa, we could kill him now and nobody would miss him. And they wanted to do the deed right there and then, no planning, just fucking do it. They were like getting a little bit of a high off of this, I think. That was on September 9th of 2001, and when Sarah and Elisa were having this conversation, Larry was already passed the fuck out because he himself had already taken a couple horse tranks. Like, that was on his own doing. Remember, he's kind of a party person, so a good old horse trank is like a baby aspirin for him. Just another day at the rodeo. So because he was already passed out, Sarah thought, maybe I'll just give him a little bit more. So she did. She put just a few more drops in his mouth thinking that'll do the trick, like for sure. So I'm sure you could imagine how shocked they were when the next day, not only did he wake up, but he went horseback riding. Then shortly after horseback riding, he did take another nap, and that's where they did the final deed. They drugged him while he was napping, and by morning they thought, okay, for sure he must be dead this time. When Sarah woke up, she gave his body a shove, and nope, not dead, still breathing. They're just thoroughly confused as to how this man is still breathing, but they thought probably by the end of the day, he's gonna be dead. His breathing certainly wasn't normal. I mean, there was nothing normal about any of this, but he was basically just very heavily sedated, so much that he couldn't walk. So Elisa hauled her ass down the street, rented him a wheelchair, put him in the wheelchair, wheeled him to the truck, plopped him in the back seat, and there, on September 11th, they began their journey home through Yosemite National Park. Meanwhile, poor Larry's in the back seat just dying. Eventually, they get to a spot where Sarah just stops the car, grabs a shovel, and gets out and starts digging. Elisa is saying she is scared titless. Even though he was now sitting in the back dying, she never thought that they would actually go through with this. Like, this was happening. And she was watching Sarah dig this hole like, what the fuck are we gonna do? Just like throw him in? And Sarah was like, yeah, what the fuck else would we do? And Elisa was like, no, this man is still breathing. He is alive. We aren't gonna bury this person alive. And Sarah was like, okay, sister, if you say so. So they ended up driving on, knowing that Larry was probably gonna die soon. But when they finally got back to Larry and Elisa's house in Sacramento, he was still alive. Very much so, in fact, just kind of in and out of consciousness. Unfortunately, though, it does kind of sound like Larry did have a bit of a rough night, and by the next day, September 12th, he was gone. Elisa told police that Sarah this, oh shit, fuck, I can't believe I just did that. I went over my eyeshadow with this. Why? I'm not used to doing my face base last. Now I have to fix this. Anyways, Elisa was telling cops that Sarah suggested that they take the body and wrap it in a sheet. Like, they can't just leave him there, they have to do something. So they did wrap him in a sheet, and they ended up putting him in kind of like a fetal position and taping him like that. They then carried his body to the garage in a refrigerator that they specifically use for wine. They take out the bottles, they take out the racks, and prop him up in there. And this kind of bought them a good bit of time so they could discuss exactly what they would do with the body. Elisa thought maybe we could bury the body in my trainer's backyard. I don't know what the fuck kind of a trainer this is, but they seem very willing to help. That's hardcore dedication. They also talked about burning the body in the desert. That is definitely an option. But they just could not come to a mutual decision of what they were going to do with this body in their wine fridge. I have never been in that pickle, nor will I ever be, but I can tell you I probably wouldn't do what they did, which was leave his body in there for 3 months. 3 fucking months. They end up deciding to go to Vegas and take his body and bury it there. Maybe they thought whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, Miss Thing, Larry was a big guy. There was no way that they alone could carry his corpse. Elisa said somehow they took a tire and like wheeled it to the fridge, then put him on top of the wheel and like wheeled him out to their Jaguar. The Jaguar they bought with his money, mind you. But he's still in the fetal position. They put him in the trunk, put him on the side, close the trunk, and they are off. They've got Larry in the trunk, the dog's in the back seat, and they were basically just kind of making a road trip out of this. Weirdest road trip ever. As if shit hasn't already hit the fan, it was about to get way worse. They get to Vegas, but the ground is so fucking hard that they cannot dig in it. Sarah, who had been trying to dig, went back to the hotel and tells Elisa, I can't fucking dig. Meanwhile, Larry is in the car, which valet now has. Like, nothing is going right here. The car wasn't in their possession, and Vegas can get kind of warm, like somebody's gonna smell him. So the only choice they had was just to drive back to California. So the next day, Elisa finds a random ass vineyard, digs a hole in it, and dumps Larry's body in the hole, covers it up very poorly. And that's that about that, but who the fuck actually killed him? Well, according to Elisa, 1000% Sarah. I mean, they're both kind of fucked at this point, so why even lie? So shortly after, police haul Sarah's ass back in and they were like, look here, Missy, you need to start talking facts because your friend just ratted you out. But Sarah's story? Much different than Elisa's. And detectives told Sarah, they were like, do not defend Elisa here, do not defend anybody, even yourself, just tell the truth. And Sarah's like, bitch, hold the phone, Elisa's blaming me? She was super confused, especially now that she didn't have her dog with her this time. They told her that Elisa made a statement saying that Sarah was the brains behind all of this, that she was the one doing the actual killing, and police were really trying to dig into this with her. They were like, did you just get caught up into something that you shouldn't have and mistakes were made? But Sarah just kept saying it was Elisa, like she was the one who did this. And she never denied the conversation between her and Elisa about killing Larry. She was like, yeah, that happened, but I didn't think we were actually gonna fucking do it. She was pretty much saying that Elisa did this, she is an evil woman. And shit really doesn't look that great for her now. I mean, she's like on the run, she's a convict. Like if either of them were going to do it, people might think it might be more Elisa that did it. And while she was being questioned, Sarah just broke down in tears and started telling a version of the story that was almost completely opposite of Elisa's. In Sarah's version, Elisa drugged him, Elisa drove them around, and Elisa made Sarah get out and start digging his grave. And Sarah said while all of this was happening, she was just stone cold with her emotions. Kind of like how she was when she was being interrogated. And at this point, I guess Sarah was just very torn because on one hand, she was deathly afraid of Elisa because she just witnessed her murder her own fucking husband. And she had no doubt in her mind that if she went to the cops, she would be the next one buried next to him. Like already, Elisa wasn't who she said she was. She wasn't who Sarah thought she was. What if she has connections? Even if Sarah tells the cops and Elisa goes to jail, who knows what contacts Elisa could have outside of jail and what they could do to Sarah. And so she was kind of in a very sticky predicament. But was Sarah's confession just a show? She was interrogated for 9 hours straight and it looked exactly like this.
She's evil. She's trying to do this to pull me down with her because she's been jealous of me. I know she has. She's an evil person. Anyone who can kill her husband is evil. Then get out and grab the shovel and go check that ground. That's not a guy. I don't want to get out. I want to say no. I was so afraid to not do what she wanted me to.
After all the questioning, detectives really did not buy Sarah's story, so she was arrested for Larry's murder. And prosecutors had this whole big plan to kind of pin the women against each other on trial, and they hoped that maybe between each other they could finally get what actually happened, like the real story. So the best they could do until that happens was just kind of prepare for the trial. Unfortunately, though, Elisa decided to kind of remove herself from that. 13 days after her arrest, she was found hanging by the neck in her cell, death by suicide, which now raises a billion other questions that can't be answered because now Sarah's left alone on trial. It's Sarah's word against everyone else because now Elisa isn't there to comment on anything. But now because Elisa isn't there, it's much easier to now point the finger at them because they can't defend themselves. So time goes on, cases do kind of take a long ass time to go to trial, and so now fast forward a year. Elisa chose her fate, now Sarah's kind of waiting for hers, and her biggest fear is that she's gonna die behind bars. For the 11-week trial that took place, Octavia, Larry's daughter, was there for every single day. She kept thinking how important it was that since he can't represent himself and be there really should be some of his family there so that people don't forget who this is about. She didn't want people to get caught up in all the drama that was happening and forget about the victim here. And Octavia herself believed wholeheartedly that this crime was committed equally by both Sarah and Elisa. Like, as far as she was concerned, she just wanted them both to rot in hell. But during the trial, Sarah kept saying that she was forced into this. She didn't have a choice. And while they were in the middle of committing this murder, she genuinely feared for her own life. But why, when she was originally being questioned by the police, didn't she just confess? She was just so calm and collective. Maybe it was because she had her dog there that she was so chill. But during that first questioning, she also remembered that Elisa was still missing, and so if she did narc on her, she could come after her. Well, remember way back, Thomas Testa, originally he was totally on Sarah's side, like he was rooting for her, but then he started digging deeper and deeper into the evidence that they had. In his opinion, did a complete 180. Everything pointed to Sarah being in charge. She didn't like Larry. People said he was self-centered, full of himself, just talking about himself all the time. He didn't like Sarah. Sarah didn't like him. It was a mutual hatred. It's almost like Larry and Sarah share a love for Elisa, and they both just like want to get the other person out of the way so that they can have their love. Kind of like a little love triangle. In fact, that's exactly what it was, and they wanted one of the corners gone. I mean, Sarah was having a great life with Elisa, very lavish, and so to Sarah, Larry was just in the way, which is very confusing because Larry was paying for both Elisa's and her lifestyle. So that's a little bit fucked up right there. Just kind of rude if you ask me. But Larry was Elisa's golden ticket. Elisa was Sarah's golden ticket. And if Larry didn't want her working there anymore, Sarah's ticket was about to be revoked. Denied, bitch. And I guess less than a week before he was murdered, he told Sarah, you gotta go, like, we are done working together. I think that's suspicious. I think that wine is gross. But also I kind of like it. It tastes like burning tires. Love putting rubber in my mouth. I'm just super confused as to how she even lasted that long as an employee. Because if I'm somebody's boss and I have an employee that I don't click with, like, why keep them around? Obviously there's clashing going on. So like with that, I don't know how much I believe that they actually hated each other. Especially if they were allegedly buying Vipers together and going to horse shows and stuff. That just doesn't quite add up for me. But it does paint the jury a mental picture as to a motive for her, like why she did it. But Sarah's lawyer ended up painting her as this sweet young child, a very innocent baby, a bebe, who basically is just incapable of doing any kind of harm to this magnitude. She was lured into Elisa's lifestyle, and Elisa was a terrible influence, a criminal running from the law, and took advantage of Sarah's naivete. And if you saw Sarah's whole video being questioned, one might believe that. But Secretary Ginger, she did not think that was the case. In fact, she knew it wasn't. Oh, good old Ginger. In the days and weeks following Larry's disappearance, rather than being emotional and distraught like a normal person would, Ginger says both Sarah and Elisa were actually kind of invigorated. They shopped together, they went to restaurants together, they even slept in the same bed together. It's like they were giving Larry the cold shoulder and Elisa had replaced him with Sarah, which sadly is kind of literal because this whole time he's out in the freezer. Ginger said that when they would be at the office, they'd get an hour, maybe 2 hours of work done and then leave. They'd flirt with boys, they'd go on shopping sprees. Sarah bought a BMW, Elisa bought the Jaguar. Same Jaguar that they stuffed Larry into. Poor Larry. Ginger said that their friendship really seemed to blossom and was kind of more than a friendship, in fact. She even remembers one of the very few hours that they were actually working. They showed her their matching underwear. They got matching underwear. Okay. But point of the story is they were not unhappy. They were very happy and they were spending cash left and right. Larry's cash at that. Poor Larry. They were spending so much money, in fact, that they got behind on their rent for the office building. And and they ended up moving their practice to Elisa and Larry's home, which now seemed to be Elisa's and Sarah's home. And there was no trace of Larry at all in the house. It was almost like he didn't exist. His clothes were gone from the closet, his belongings weren't there anymore, and the double vanity in the bathroom went from his and hers to hers and hers. Oh, this blush was a statement. Whew. But they told the employees that were working at the house that they were kind of moving Larry out. He wasn't around anymore, so why bother keeping his shit? Very suspicious because once again, he is feet away in the garage in the fridge. And the idea that Sarah was just some young, innocent child, a puppet of Elisa's, absolutely fucking bonkers, says Ginger. I guess around the office, it was very clear that Sarah was actually the one in charge. And at the trial, because Elisa couldn't be cross-examined, she wasn't there, they ended up throwing away her confession footage. Like, they didn't even show it, so pretty much everything fell onto Sarah's shoulders. All she could do was sit there, look pretty and wide-eyed and innocent-seeming, with her very religious family sitting behind her, holding their Bibles. There was no DNA, there was no witnesses, no blood, really no evidence. It seemed like the entire case against Sarah was kind of circumstantial. So when it finally came to the verdict, what did the jury find her guilty of? Voluntary manslaughter and accessory to murder, not first degree. Prosecutor Thomas Testa was very much pushing for first degree. He thought the verbal evidence was just overwhelming. And to this day, he thinks that if she wasn't a tall, pretty young blonde, and if her family wasn't behind her holding their Bibles, the verdict probably would have been a little bit different. And she probably would have gotten a life sentence. Instead, she got 11 years and served 8, and now she's a free woman. She was released back in 2011 when she was only like 30. Obviously, Larry's daughter Octavia was very unhappy with the sentencing. She wanted her in there for life, but she has forgiven her mainly for her own sanity. But yeah, I just don't know how to feel about this one. Because like, looking at the videos, she does seem very distraught, very unhappy, but then at some points it does seem a little bit over the top and like extra dramatic. But also, what the fuck with Elisa? She left and we have so many unanswered questions. I guess the fact that she killed herself, to me, kind of points more towards her being guilty. Because if it was Sarah's fault, I guess, I mean, she still would have gotten convicted of something. They both were there. But I don't know about this one. What do you think? Do you think Sarah did it? Do you think she was actually scared? Do you think she was a huge player in this? Wasn't that just freaking wild? Aren't you glad you stayed? Thank you so much for being here. Check my social medias out. I'll link them down below, and have a beautiful rest of your day.